Am I the asshole for taking my son on 2 trips out of the country next year? My ex-wife and I separated in 2022, and we finalized our divorce in January 2024. Our son was 9 when everything started, and now he's 11. Since the separation, I've been paying child support, and I try to help her out whenever I can. Last summer, I took my son to Cancun for a vacation, and I paid for most of it so that she could join us. I wanted her to be able to have those memories with him, too. Now, for 2025, 2 incredible travel opportunities came up. First, I planned a trip to Switzerland in February for 9 days, and then I planned a trip to Japan in the summer for 3 weeks. These trips are something I've been really excited about because they're great chances for my son to experience different cultures and broaden his perspective on life. Before finalizing anything, I discussed both trips with my ex-wife to make sure she was okay with it. She told me she was fine, but recently, she's been saying that I didn't consult her properly and that I just told her about the trips without truly discussing them. I don't think this is true because I wouldn't take our son to these places without her consent, and I made sure we had a conversation about it. We just got off the phone where she was crying, saying how unfair it is that I get to make all of these amazing memories with our son, and she can't because she can't afford to go on the trips herself. I offered to let her come along, saying I'd cover all her accommodations and activities, but I couldn't afford to buy her plane ticket. She got upset because she also can't afford the ticket, which I totally understand, but I didn't know how else to handle it. Now, she's making me feel like I'm being an asshole for taking our son on these trips. She accused me of rubbing it in her face by planning all of this without her being able to participate in the same way. To clarify, I'm not trying to rub anything in her face at all. I have been asking for her input on the trips, especially for the Switzerland one, because it's coming up soon and I wanted her opinion on things like what to pack for him or if there's anything she'd like him to do or not do. She seems upset that I'm discussing these things with her, but I feel like I'm just trying to get her input as a co-parent. The biggest issue she has with the Switzerland trip is that he will miss 9 days of school. We talked about it and we both agreed that it was fine, especially since I've already coordinated with his teacher and the school. He's doing well academically, already getting all A's and in gifted classes, so I'm not concerned about him falling behind. I truly thought we had talked everything through and agreed on the plans, but now I'm questioning if I missed something. Maybe I didn't communicate properly, or maybe she's just forgotten certain parts of the discussion. I don't have the old text to confirm everything, so I'm feeling a bit lost here. I've already booked the flights and made the plans, and I don't know what to do next. I'm wondering if I should just go ahead and do these trips without involving her any further. Am I being an asshole for taking our son on these trips without her involvement, or is she overreacting? Edit *, I wanted to add some context about the trips. The Switzerland trip came about because I had a bunch of flight credits that were about to expire before March 1st, 2025. I originally planned to visit my sister in Ireland, but when I saw how cheap flights to Switzerland were, I decided it would be a perfect opportunity to take my son there instead. He hasn't seen his aunt in 4 years, so this will also be a chance for him to reconnect with her. The Japan trip is something my son has been asking for because he's become really interested in the culture and the language. Since I get large annual bonuses at work, I've been saving up for trips like these, and I thought it would be a great opportunity to take him to a place he's really interested in before he enters middle school. I grew up on a farm in rural Georgia, and we never traveled when I was a kid. I didn't even leave the country until I was 20. I really want my son to experience more of the world while he's young because I think it will help shape his perspective and give him opportunities one didn't have. Am I the asshole for telling my general manager about how my coworker is being inappropriate with female coworkers? I, 20-year-old male, have been friends with my coworker, 21-year-old male, since 3rd grade, and we've been really close for the past 3 years. Recently, he moved in with me and my parents, and I even got him a job where I worked this past spring. He's always been a pretty sexual person and has had significant anger issues, which I've known about for a long time. Ever since he was hired, he has been overly familiar with the girls at work. What makes things worse is that most of the female coworkers are around 17 years old, with only one being 18. His behavior is definitely crossing a line, and the whole situation has started to feel increasingly inappropriate. He'll poke their stomachs, make comments about their bodies, and even comment on their mouths. He's especially touchy with the 18-year-old, making inappropriate gestures, touching her in places that are definitely not safe for work, and even pulling at her bra strap. He constantly claims that everything is fine because the girls allegedly say it's okay. What makes this even worse is that he isn't even single. He's had a girlfriend for almost a year now, yet he's always complaining about her. Both of us recently got promotions which placed us in leadership roles. As a result, we are now expected to set a good example for the rest of the team, and any inappropriate behavior could lead to serious consequences. But despite our new positions and responsibilities, my coworker hasn't stopped his behavior. In fact, it's actually gotten worse. I, along with some other coworkers, have brought it up to our managers multiple times, but whenever they speak to him, he just gets angry and blames other people for his actions. His behavior is making the entire crew uncomfortable, and today, I finally took it upon myself to bring this to the attention of our general manager, GM. This isn't the first time my coworkers' actions have been raised with the GM, but it was the first time that I personally spoke out. I told the GM everything I knew about the situation and how inappropriate my coworker was acting toward the female staff. The GM told me he would talk to him during his next shift, which is coming up this Thursday, December 19th. I'll update everyone after that. Now, I'm feeling really guilty. It's hard for me to shake the feeling that I've betrayed my best friend by going behind his back and snitching on him. The truth is, I've never really directly confronted him about his behavior. I've tried to make subtle comments like, "This isn't okay," or "Maybe you should consider doing things differently," but he always brushes it off, saying, "It's all going according to plan." I'm really worried he's going to lash out at me or my coworkers once he finds out, and since I live with him, I'm honestly afraid that things are going to get really tense between us. It feels like a huge disruption in my life, and I'm struggling with the guilt. So, Reddit, am I the asshole for telling the GM about my coworker's inappropriate behavior? Please help. Am I the asshole for not attending my friend's parents' funeral? My friend's father passed away unexpectedly, and as you can imagine, it was a very hard time for her. Around the same time, my mom, who has been battling stage 4 lung cancer for 2 years, was told that her cancer had spread to her brain. We were originally expecting an MRI result that showed stability, but instead we learned she needed urgent brain surgery or she would die. The surgery was scheduled for the end of the week, just one day before my friend's father's funeral. This was an extremely difficult situation for me. My mind was racing, and I could barely process the gravity of my mom's situation. I knew I couldn't be both physically present for my mom and emotionally present for my friend. I was so overwhelmed. I couldn't handle being at the funeral and feeling like I was mentally and emotionally elsewhere. My mom's surgery was meant to be minimally invasive, with many patients being able to go home within a few days, so I thought I could focus on being there for her, getting her home, and then later supporting my friend. But things didn't go as planned. My mom's surgery turned out to be much more complicated than expected, and she ended up spending 2 weeks in the neurology ICU. She was unwell, and at one point, she tried to pull out her cords, became agitated, and even lashed out at me, calling me names and accusing me of being a terrible daughter. The situation escalated to the point where security had to be called, and it was over a month before she could be transferred back home. During all of this, I kept in touch with our mutual friend, trying to explain my situation and check in on how she was doing. I also talked to my therapist about my guilt over not being there for my friend, but she helped me realize that I simply didn't have the emotional capacity to be there for anyone else, especially considering what was happening with my mom. Now, my friend has reached out to me, saying she's hurt and upset that I didn't attend the funeral or support her in her time of grief. She's completely justified in feeling that way. She said that my mom's surgery wasn't a valid reason for me to not show up for her, and that I could have at least sent flowers or a card, which in hindsight, I absolutely should have done but didn't even think of at the time. What makes this even more complicated is that I lost my own parent when I was 14. So my friend is hurt that, having gone through that myself, I wasn't there for her when she needed support. I tend to deal with my emotions by retreating inward, taking space, and processing alone. But I didn't consider that my friend might deal with grief differently, and I should have been more mindful of that. Now, I feel like a terrible friend and a huge asshole. I regret not being there for her, but at the same time, I truly didn't have the emotional bandwidth for it. So, am I the asshole for not attending my friend's parents' funeral? Or is she justified in feeling hurt? Am I the asshole for only wanting my mom to be grandma and not his? I, 29F, and my husband, 33M, have been married for 4 years, and we've been together for 10. We come from very different cultural backgrounds. My family lives far away, while his family lives right next door to us. We have a 2-year-old son, and now that he's entering the toddler stage and becoming more interactive, we're starting to clash more about how we want to raise him. Today, I overheard my husband's mom and sister calling her grandma instead of the usual apama, which is grandma in their native language. This caught me off guard, especially since my mom has always been called grandma by our son. It made me feel uncomfortable, and after thinking about it all day, I decided to approach my husband calmly. I told him I didn't want our son to call both his grandmothers grandma, especially when grandma holds a special meaning for me and my mom. I suggested that his mom continue to be called Apama because that's meaningful to her, and I'd like to reserve grandma for my mom. My husband immediately got defensive and angry. He accused me of causing problems over something that he felt was trivial, and a big argument ensued. I ended up in tears, trying to explain that I didn't want his mom to take on both titles, because it felt unfair. I didn't want grandma to be diluted, especially when it holds so much sentimental value for me and my side of the family. Beyond this issue, I've been feeling frustrated for a while with how his family behaves, especially with boundaries. For example, they've walked in on me while I was breastfeeding, handed my son off to strangers without asking, and ignored my boundaries when I've said no. They've inserted themselves into our disagreements, and I constantly feel like they try to take over when they're around. My husband knows I'm unhappy with these issues, and I've told him that I expect him to handle conflicts with his family. I think since he's made the decision to live so close to them, it's his responsibility to ensure our new family unit and boundaries are respected. But his mom constantly oversteps, and I feel like they're always trying to be the default family. For instance, they take my son out of my arms without asking and just assume they have first dibs on him whenever we're all together. This dynamic makes me uncomfortable and contributes to my desire for some clear distinctions between my family and his, especially when it comes to roles like being a grandparent. I just want to feel heard and respected, and I want conversations about raising our son to go smoothly without turning into an argument. I don't think it's too much to ask for a little balance here, but am I the asshole for wanting to make sure my mom is the only grandma, while his mom gets to keep Apama as a meaningful title? Or am I overreacting? Am I the asshole for asking my cousin, who doesn't knit, to give me our deceased grandmother's knitting needles? When my grandmother passed away, all of her grandchildren were given a chance to select items from her belongings. She had taught all of us to knit when we were young, and while most of my cousins gave up the hobby, I stuck with it. So, when it came time to pick something, I only requested her knitting needle kit, as it was a sentimental item that held great meaning to me. My other cousins picked out jewelry, perfume bottles, and silver combs. One younger cousin, who doesn't knit, asked for the knitting needle kit along with some of the same items. This led to some debate between my mom and my aunt over who deserved the needles. My mom eventually relented, not wanting to cause a rift during a difficult time, so my cousin ended up with the knitting needles. I, on the other hand, received a perfume bottle that my grandmother had loved and a small inheritance. Fast forward to Thanksgiving, and my cousin casually mentioned that she had been cleaning out her attic. She had come across some of our grandmother's things, including the very knitting needles I had wanted. These items were sitting forgotten in her attic while she wasn't even using them. I asked her if she was using the knitting needles, and she said no. I then asked if she would consider giving them to me, since I still knit and they held sentimental value for me. She said she'd think about it. Later on, my cousin's mother, my aunt, came out of nowhere and accused me of being awful for even asking for the needles. She said I was bullying my younger cousin into giving up a sentimental item. I was completely taken aback, as I had simply asked politely. My cousin had said she would think about it, and that was the extent of the conversation. My aunt raised her voice at me, causing my uncle to step in and try to de-escalate the situation. I was shocked, especially since I had been sober. I was the designated driver, and had done nothing more than ask for something that had meaning to me. Later, I talked to my mom about what had happened when the estate was being divided. She didn't want to talk about it and implied I was being weird for even asking about the knitting needles. She said it wasn't my business what my cousin had received. Ironically, my cousin had been the one to openly discuss all of the items she had gotten from the estate, including the larger inheritance of $10,000 and the perfume bottles I had been given. I feel like I was simply asking for something that was meaningful to me, especially since my cousin had no interest in using the knitting needles. But now I feel like I've caused a major family issue, and I'm left wondering if I'm in the wrong here. So, am I the asshole for asking my cousin for the knitting needles, even though she doesn't use them? Am I the asshole for talking to my single friend about my relationship, even though it makes her uncomfortable? So, I, 21F, have been best friends with my friend, 21F, for about 4 years now. For the past 3.5 years, we've both been single together. However, she has had very few suitors and has said that the idea of being in a relationship with anyone is inconceivable to her. She struggles with social interactions, as she said she lacks social skills, and she's sex-repulsed, asexual, and probably a lesbian, though she's not completely sure. I'm currently in a relationship with my boyfriend, 32M, and we've been together since March. We hit it off quickly, and while I was super excited and wanted to share the news with my best friend, I immediately noticed her mood shift when I told her. She said she was happy for me, but I could tell she wasn't as excited about it as I was. Over the past several months, I've freely talked about him and our relationship, but every time I do, she gets visibly upset or moody. It's like a cloud over her whenever our conversations shift toward relationships. When our other two friends, who are also in relationships, and I hang out, the topic of relationships often comes up naturally. We talk about funny stories, similarities between our relationships, and occasionally about gifts for our partners or plans for the future. We always try to keep it PG, respecting her discomfort with anything sexual, but it feels like she just can't relate to any part of it. She gets upset and silent when the conversation isn't about her, and this has been bothering me. I love my boyfriend and I love talking about him. He's a huge part of my life and makes me really happy. At one point, I decided to bring this up privately with her, explaining how I feel. I asked her if it would be okay for me to talk about my boyfriend and my relationship, and she told me it was selfish of me to talk about anything boyfriend related because she can't relate. She said it makes her feel left out and uncomfortable. I understand that, but I also feel like I should be able to talk about my relationship, especially when it's such a big part of my life. Today, we were all in a group chat, myself, my two friends in relationships, and another friend who is also in a relationship. We were briefly talking about gift ideas for our partners and how excited we were for the holidays. She left the group chat with a message saying, "Add me back in January, cute coolie stuff," and then exited. We immediately added her back, but it really stung. It feels like a harsh reminder that anything relationship related is off limits for her, and that I can't share this part of my life with her without her feeling upset or alienated. I really value our friendship, but it feels like I'm walking on eggshells all the time when it comes to this topic. I want to be able to share this part of my life with her, especially since it makes me so happy, but I'm afraid it might ruin our friendship if I keep pushing it. So, am I the asshole for wanting to share my relationship with her, even though it clearly makes her uncomfortable? Should I just keep this part of my life to myself to avoid upsetting her? Am I the asshole for not inviting my boss to my personal holiday party? Every year, my partner and I throw a big holiday party for friends and family in early December. It's something we've done for the past 5 years. I've been working at my current company for 3 December holidays now. The first year, I only invited 1 or 2 coworkers, just the people I was close with. The next year, I expanded the invite and included more coworkers, including my boss. I work at a small company, about 25 people, so it wasn't a huge deal. I was happy to have anyone come, and about 7 to 8 coworkers, including my boss, showed up. It was fun, no issues. This year, however, things have been different. I've been having some ongoing issues with my boss. I still like them as a person, but as a manager, they've been difficult to deal with. I've been working hard to set boundaries for my mental health, and the boss has not been very supportive of that. So this year, I decided to only invite a handful of coworkers to the party. Not everyone from the office. I didn't invite my boss partly because of the issues we've had and partly because some coworkers had expressed they didn't want the boss there either. I didn't want to make a big deal out of it, so I kept it quiet. If my boss had asked me why they weren't invited, I would have been upfront about it, but they never brought it up. After the party, things started to change. My boss has been giving me the cold shoulder, being petty, and excluding me from important work. It feels like I went from being a favorite employee to barely getting acknowledged. At the company's Christmas party, my boss made sure I was seated at the back of the room with people he's not fond of. There was no communication, and the vibe was pretty tense. I honestly thought I was making the right decision for myself and the other people who were invited, but now I'm dealing with these awkward, passive-aggressive consequences. For context, I'm in my 30s, and most of the party guests were in their 30s as well. My boss is in their 50s, which also may have played a role in how the situation unfolded. Just to clarify, I didn't uninvite my boss. Last year, I invited them, and this year I just didn't. So, am I the asshole for not inviting my boss to my personal holiday party? Or did I make a reasonable choice, and now I'm just dealing with the fallout? Am I the asshole? Asking for my job back? Am I the asshole for asking for my job back? Background. I've been at my current company for almost 10 years. In a niche field. Last year, I internally applied and was hired for a new role across the pond. The company helped with my work visa, but little else. So I sold my house and moved. I have a standard employment contract and was supposed to be in the new role for 3 years. Trial period. Recently, in late summer, my dad told me that he probably had serious cancer and that he felt terrible. That they suspected he had tumors elsewhere, was unsure about everything, but had appointments scheduled to get it figured out. Having gone through untimely family deaths in 2022, and realizing that my dad is the most important thing to me, I was terribly upset and thought maybe going back closer to home might be best. I thought I should talk to my team to figure it out. Action. I reached out to my new boss and role manager, and told them the above. Told them we weren't sure of anything, but I feared the worst. They seemed understanding and supportive. The boss gave me a few weeks to tell him my final decision, though he shortened my decision date. In September, he wanted an answer. I still didn't know much and said, if you need a decision now, I should probably go back home and into my old role. He said okay. I guess talked to some people and made a plan to transition back to my old role in late November. Nothing was ever written to me about it, just verbal. The plan proceeded, but now it turns out that Dad needs surgery, but he's not dying. When I told our company COO at a party recently that things had changed 2 weeks ago, he said to talk to my boss. Nothing was set in stone. That week, I talked to my boss and manager in my new role and asked to stay. They are pissed. They told me I need to stick to my agreements and that they've moved on. Told me that this is not how businesses work and they aren't interested in entertaining these conversations anymore. My boss went so far as to say, you're lucky to have any job at all. When I told the CEO what was up, he wanted to cut you. I find this troubling if true. Question. Am I the asshole for asking in the first place? What if I fight this more? I could try to talk again to the COO, everyone's boss but under the CEO, and explain. I'd honestly much prefer the job for which I uprooted my life, or I could just keep my head down. I'm honestly miserable and sad about the situation. I regret saying anything at all, but I'm feeling I'm TA for starting anything all. Final note. To my understanding, the COO has not been told the full truth, but I don't know him all that well and the team seems set against me. However, I honestly can't afford to lose my job. My flat is too expensive. AITA for asking and potentially fighting this more? Am I the asshole? Asking for my job back? Am I the asshole for asking for my job back? Background. I've been at my current company for almost 10 years. In a niche field. Last year, I internally applied and was hired for a new role across the pond. The company helped with my work visa, but little else. So I sold my house and moved. I have a standard employment contract and was supposed to be in the new role for 3 years. Trial period. Recently, in late summer, my dad told me that he probably had serious cancer and that he felt terrible. That they suspected he had tumors elsewhere, was unsure about everything, but had appointments scheduled to get it figured out. Having gone through untimely family deaths in 2022, and realizing that my dad is the most important thing to me, I was terribly upset and thought maybe going back closer to home might be best. I thought I should talk to my team to figure it out. Action. I reached out to my new boss and role manager, and told them the above. Told them we weren't sure of anything, but I feared the worst. They seemed understanding and supportive. The boss gave me a few weeks to tell him my final decision, though he shortened my decision date. In September, he wanted an answer. I still didn't know much and said, if you need a decision now, I should probably go back home and into my old role. He said okay. I guess talked to some people and made a plan to transition back to my old role in late November. Nothing was ever written to me about it, just verbal. The plan proceeded, but now it turns out that Dad needs surgery, but he's not dying. When I told our company COO at a party recently that things had changed 2 weeks ago, he said to talk to my boss. BC nothing was set in stone. That week, I talked to my boss and manager in my new role and asked to stay. They are pissed. They told me I need to stick to my agreements and that they've moved on. Told me that this is not how businesses work and they aren't interested in entertaining these conversations anymore. My boss went so far as to say, you're lucky to have any job at all. BC when I told the CEO what was up, he wanted to cut you. I find this troubling if true. Question. Am I the asshole for asking in the first place? What if I fight this more? I could try to talk again to the COO, everyone's boss but under the CEO, and explain. I'd honestly much prefer the job for which I uprooted my life, or I could just keep my head down. I'm honestly miserable and sad about the situation. I regret saying anything at all, but I'm feeling I'm TA for starting anything all. Final note. To my understanding, the COO has not been told the full truth, but I don't know him all that well and the team seems set against me. However, I honestly can't afford to lose my job. My flat is too expensive. AITA for asking and potentially fighting this more? Am I the asshole for leaving my friend stranded on our girls' trip? I'm really starting to doubt if I did the right thing here. Fake names. Sarah and I have been best friends since middle school. She comes on all my family vacations and spends the big holidays with us. At this point, she's become kind of like an adoptive sister to my family. For the holidays, my parents gifted me and Sarah a trip to Newport Beach using their timeshare. Let me be transparent, I know my family has money. We aren't filthy rich, my parents both work full-time jobs, have raised me and my siblings on budgeting, getting a good education to get a good career, etc. But we are comfortable. The plan was to drive to Newport on Friday, spend the whole weekend there, and leave for home Monday morning. Friday morning, Sarah and I took turns driving my car to California. During the last couple hours of the trip, she mentioned that her boyfriend would be driving up to join us and staying at a cheaper hotel nearby. Grant has been Sarah's BF since the beginning of this year. We aren't close, only friends. Through Sarah. All weekend I've felt like a third wheel on my own vacation. Almost everything we did Grant came with. And when he wasn't, she was talking about him. Sunday night was our last night in Newport. The plan was to check out Monday morning, so we were already mostly packed up already. The two of us went out for dinner and I decided to bring up my feelings. I told her that I felt like Grant was intruding, and it upset me that she invited him along on our girls' trip. Sarah snapped, "Is that why you've been sulking all weekend?" She said she doesn't see the big deal with inviting him. Usually my whole family comes on our vacations and she's all alone. When I said this is different because it was supposed to be just us, she said that he has his own room so it shouldn't even matter. She said I am being jealous, possessive, and that I am not the only person in her life. I was hurt and didn't want to cause a scene in front of everyone, so I went outside to smoke. I don't know why I did what I did next. I left Sarah at the restaurant and drove back to the hotel. I finished packing up our stuff and checked out early. Only my name was on the reservation because it was my parents' timeshare. The hotel was booked using points, so we did not have to pay for it. I left Sarah's suitcase at the front desk and I drove home. Sarah and Grant were calling and texting me the entire drive home, saying that what I did was shitty and dangerous. I didn't answer. Sarah called me a spoiled brat using my parents' money to get friends. This really upsets me because if she really felt that way, she sure hasn't shown it all these years. My parents think Sarah is being mean, but they think I shouldn't have left her stranded. Should I apologize to Sarah? Or should she? Now that I'm reflecting, I think it is possible I overreacted. But why didn't she ask me or tell me Grant would be joining us until after we were already almost there? Is this worth ending a friendship over? Am I the asshole for making plans with my colleague and her fiancé, not knowing he has history with my fiancé's ex? I, 28F, recently got into a huge argument with my fiancé, John, 36M, over what I thought was an innocent plan to hang out with my colleague Andrea and her fiancé Andrew. Here's the context. A few days ago, after a 9-hour drive home from our holiday, John and I went out for drinks with my boss, Andrea and her fiancé, who flew in from another country, and a few other friends. Andrea and I have become good friends through work, but we don't get to see each other often since she works remotely and moved abroad 2 years ago. During the drinks, I suggested that while she's here, we should meet up for drinks more or something fun. Naturally, I included her fiancé, Andrew, in the invitation. He's her partner, after all. For context, this was my first time meeting Andrew since they moved shortly after I joined the company. John is not a big fan of plans outside his comfort zone. We jokingly call it his bubble. So I lightheartedly told him, if you don't want to join, that's okay. I'll still go with them. This wasn't meant maliciously. It's a dynamic we've always joked about. John got really quiet, but I assumed he was tired from the drive. Later, when he said he wanted to go home, I told him I understood but would stay a bit longer and let a friend, not Andrea or Andrew, drop me off. John got irritable, saying he didn't want me staying with this crowd. He refused to explain, so I brushed it off. On the drive home, things exploded. John angrily revealed that Andrew used to sleep with his ex several years ago, and when John confronted him back then, Andrew denied it despite there being evidence and witnesses. This history made John feel uncomfortable, especially with me joking about going out even if he didn't join. We had a massive fight in the car. John accused me of prioritizing plans with Andrew, even though I'd focused on Andrea when inviting them, and insisted I said I'd go out with him no matter what. I was completely blindsided. I had no idea about their history and was just trying to spend time with Andrea. To me, Andrew was there by proxy, as her fiancé. I feel like I didn't do anything wrong. How was I supposed to know about this history? And even if I had known, I don't think it's fair to expect me to cancel plans entirely or exclude Andrea just because of John's unresolved issues with Andrew. John and I have talked it out since, but I still feel hurt and confused. Am I the asshole here? Am I the asshole for telling my mom I'm not attending Christmas next year? This will be my first Reddit post, so bear with me. On December 21st, 2023, I had a child. At that time, the child's father was not in the picture. Now, he is back in the picture, and we have a custody agreement that includes the child spending every other Christmas with him. This means I won't have my son for Christmas in 2024, and I only get him for 4 hours on Christmas Day. I plan to spend that time with my parents and siblings. When I informed my parents that I wouldn't have my son for Christmas this year, my mom sent a long paragraph in the family group chat detailing dates for upcoming family holidays, both on her side and my dad's side. At the end of the text, she mentioned that Christmas for 2025 at her house would be on December 21st. I then told her that my son and I would not be attending Christmas at her house next year. I've been very clear with my family ever since I was pregnant, and I had my due date that I would not be able to join in the holiday celebrations every year due to the custody situation. But my mom is upset with me for not attending next Christmas and suggested that I could just celebrate my son's birthday the following day instead. Now my entire family is mad at me for not allowing my son to attend Christmas with them. He'll be 2 years old then. It's causing a lot of tension in my family, especially since my brother and my mom also have December birthdays. I thought they'd understand my position better, but this has turned into a huge conflict. I just want to know if I'm in the right for not attending Christmas next year. Am I the asshole for refusing to add the girlfriend of one of my friends to our group chat? Hi, everyone, my first language isn't English, so I'm sorry for any grammar mistakes, and it's also my first time ever posting, so sorry if there are any formatting mistakes. So I, 19F, have a friend group made up of my boyfriend, 19M, of more than 2 years, and 5 other guys, one of which is Josh, 19M, who has a girlfriend of 3 months, Emma, 19F. And today one of my other friends asked if everyone was okay with Emma joining the WhatsApp group chat we have with everyone. There is also some relevant history here. Emma was classmates with my younger sister, 17F, a couple of years ago. My sister has been bullied in that class, and although Emma did not actively participate in the bullying, I do resent her heavily for never stepping in or defending my sister, as they were friends at the time, and I feel that she could have at least said something instead of quietly watching my sister getting bullied. Because of this, when my sister went to high school, she lost touch with Emma. However, Emma has said about my sister that she was ungrateful, a bitch, and a bad friend for leaving her behind after she went to high school. Now, moving on a couple of years, Emma has started dating Josh, and to say I dislike her is an understatement, because of more reasons than I can put here. However, the main reason beside the whole thing with my sister is that her relationship with Josh is just plain horrible. They violently make out in front of all our friends just because they can. They call each other absolutely disgusting nicknames like kitty titties just because they find it funny to irritate us, as well as the fact that have repeatedly asked me and my boyfriend to join them in the bedroom, even though we both have made it abundantly clear that we are very uncomfortable with being asked that. I just feel like they bring out the worst in each other, and the main reason why I do not want her to be included in our group chat is that she loves brainrot. She almost exclusively texts brainrot when in other group chats with her, and apart from the fact that I just don't get what is so funny about it, it also spams my whole phone, and I'm afraid I will read over plans that are made in that group chat if it's just surrounded by a bunch of brainrot messages. However, when I bring up these points to my friends, they always kind of dismiss me, as they all really like her for some reason, and I don't want to start any drama in the friend group, as I get really stressed about friendship drama. It might also be relevant to add that only my boyfriend knows about the part with my sister, as our social circles overlap in certain places, and I don't feel it's my place to tell something so personal about my sister to people who know her and her friends. So Reddit, would I be the asshole for refusing to let Emma join the group chat and starting drama? Am I the asshole for only giving my dad 2 pieces of sushi? I, 25M, lost my finance job a while back and have been working a minimum wage job while living at home with my parents. It's been tough, especially with job hunting and feeling like I've had to start over. One night, after work and hours of scrolling through job boards, I realized I hadn't eaten all day. On a whim, I called my mom, 58F, who was out at a sushi restaurant, and asked if she could bring me back a roll. She said it was too expensive but might consider it if the sushi was good. I told her not to worry and that I'd figure something out myself. The thing about my mom is she hates cooking, so growing up, I learned to make my own meals, and hers sometimes too. That night, I mentioned to my boyfriend, 24M, over FaceTime that I'd been working a lot and was thinking of treating myself to sushi. He immediately offered to order it for me, which was such a sweet gesture. It arrived just as my mom came home. As soon as she saw it, she started ranting about how bad the sushi at her restaurant was because it was made by Chinese people, and then accused me of being selfish for not sharing with my dad. I told her it was a gift from my boyfriend and didn't have enough to share, but my dad could try 2 pieces. She wasn't having it and started yelling about how ungrateful I am and how they're raising a selfish monster. My dad, who didn't even know about the sushi, came out confused. My mom then made a big show of saying she'd buy my dad sushi herself, even though she'd just been eating sushi at a restaurant. At this point, I just wanted to enjoy my food. I left 2 pieces for my dad and took them to his room, but it felt forced, like I was doing it to appease her, not because I wanted to. Even then, my mom called me a selfish monster again. I got fed up and told her she was being a hypocrite. She wouldn't even buy me a roll earlier but expected me to share what my boyfriend had bought. When I mentioned it was from him, they told me not to call him my boyfriend because they're homophobic. This isn't new behavior. My mom never cooks, so we're all constantly fending for ourselves. My brother, 31M, even has a meal plan just for himself. I usually don't mind sharing or cooking for my mom when she asks, but I'm tired of her attacking my character. She does this all the time, like when my boyfriend got me a scarf and a pearl ring for Christmas. Instead of being happy for me, She said I should have gotten her a scarf too and tried to take the ring, saying it matched her earrings. It feels like she projects her own selfishness onto me, and I've had enough of it. Am I the asshole for only giving my dad 2 pieces of sushi? Am I the asshole for taking my biological nieces on days out and excluding my adopted nephew? I, 42F, have 2 biological nieces, Flo, 14F, and Ivy, 11F, and an adopted nephew, Ryan, 10M, through my brother Tom, 46M, and his wife Kate, 45F. Ryan was adopted 2 years ago after being in foster care for 3 years. He had a really difficult start in life, and as a result, he has some behavioral and developmental issues that make certain activities difficult for him, like sitting through long performances or events. This means that when I take my daughter Ava, 12F, and the girls out, Ryan isn't always included. I want to emphasize that I've always made an effort to include Ryan in other ways, but some of the outings I plan just aren't a good fit for him. One of the reasons for this is Ryan's behavior can be unpredictable. He has meltdowns which can be loud and physical, making it hard to take him to certain places. For example, when I take Ava to the theater or other quiet events, I often bring the girls along because they understand how to handle the situation and can help Ryan's parents when needed. I also think it's important for Flo and Ivy to have some time just for themselves, without the responsibility of looking out for their brother. The issue came up recently when I planned a trip to a Christmas theme park in London with the girls. It's quite an expensive trip, and I was paying for it myself. Kate called me and asked if Ryan could come along because he had seen the ads and really wanted to go. She said he went 2 years ago and loved it, and his sisters would be there to help him if he struggled. I told Kate I didn't think it was a good idea, as I had planned this as a special girls' day and I didn't feel comfortable adding Ryan into the mix, especially given how unpredictable things can get when he's in large crowds. I also didn't think it was fair to put the responsibility on the girls to take care of him when they were supposed to be enjoying their day. Kate was upset, and our conversation got heated. She accused me of being ableist for not wanting to include Ryan and suggested that I was biased against him since he's not biologically mine. I argued that it wasn't about favoritism but about the type of outing I had planned. I didn't want it to be ruined by having to manage Ryan's behavior. In the end, Kate got upset and hung up. Things got more complicated when Kate told Flo and Ivy that they either had to ask me to let Ryan come or they wouldn't be allowed to go at all. Flo sent me a text begging me not to let Ryan come, while Ivy was more conflicted, not wanting to exclude Ryan but also not wanting the day to be ruined. To make matters worse, my mother, Tom, and my sister all contacted me, saying I should bring Ryan so it wouldn't look like I was showing favoritism. On the other hand, my husband is supporting me in this decision. I do want to clarify that I do spend quality time with Ryan. We live very close by, and I often visit their house. Ryan and I bond over Lego, which is something we both enjoy. We also spend time together when Tom and Kate are around. I just tend to plan outings based on my daughter's interests, which are very different from Ryan's. Ava loves artsy, girly things like the theater, shopping, and movie nights, while Ryan is more into Lego, video games, and martial arts. So, our interests don't always align, and I plan my days out around what she likes. In the end, I'm torn. I don't want to hurt Ryan's feelings, but I also don't want to feel forced to include him when I'm not comfortable managing his needs in certain settings. I feel like I'm being asked to put the responsibility on Flo and Ivy when this was supposed to be their special day. So, AITA for sticking to my decision and excluding Ryan from this outing? Am I the asshole for skipping Thanksgiving to avoid my cousin's fiancé? I'm a 27-year-old woman, and I've always been very close with one of my cousins, who is 30. However, there's one issue. I don't particularly like her fiancé. They've been together for about 5 years now, but every time we have family gatherings, he's either grumpy, extremely drunk, or both. In our family, Thanksgiving has a very specific routine. After dinner, we always have the Charlie Brown Christmas movie on in the background to kick off the holiday season. The volume is usually turned down to almost zero, so it's more of a tradition than something we actively sit and watch. We do this every year, and it's never really been an issue, at least not until he started coming around. 2 years ago, even though the movie was playing at a very low volume, and the football games were already over, he complained about it being on. It seemed odd to me since it wasn't disrupting anyone or interfering with the conversation, but he made a fuss anyway. Then last year, things got worse. He showed up to Thanksgiving completely drunk, slurring his words, stumbling around, and, unsurprisingly, he started being rude to my cousin when she tried to offer him water instead of beer. He started complaining about the Charlie Brown Christmas movie right away, even though it was just playing in the background, and even though he wasn't really paying attention to it. The worst part? After about an hour of him complaining, we actually gave in and switched it to something else. The movie was playing in another room and he was in the kitchen, so I thought that was the end of it. But then I did something that I know was a bit petty. I went and put Charlie Brown Christmas back on. I hid the remote under a pillow, thinking he wouldn't notice, since he wasn't paying attention to the TV. But when he walked back into the room and saw it playing again, he absolutely lost it. He started yelling at me to turn the fucking movie off. He was screaming so loudly that the whole table could hear him. My brothers and other cousins were looking at me, and I felt humiliated. At that point, one of my brothers stood up and told him to leave. My cousin and her fiancé left shortly after, and he apologized to me later. However, my cousin acted like it never happened, and it still bothers me to this day. It was a really jarring experience to have someone yell and curse at me in front of everyone, especially at a family gathering. So, this year, when Thanksgiving rolled around, I made the decision not to go. I just couldn't deal with being around him again, and I'm still not comfortable with the way he treated me last year. I didn't want to face the same tension, so I stayed home. When my aunt and uncle found out I wasn't coming, they were upset and tried to guilt trip me. I've seen my cousin and her fiancé at other events this year, and we've been cordial, but it's clear to me that things are still awkward between us. I guess I feel a little guilty because of my behavior last year, like hiding the remote, but I think I was justified in skipping Thanksgiving this year. My two brothers have been on my side throughout this whole ordeal, and my other cousins have backed me up as well. But I still wonder if I'm being unreasonable. Should I have just sucked it up and gone? Am I the asshole for skipping Thanksgiving to avoid this guy? Am I the asshole for wanting my sister-in-law to stop making my husband pay for their joint gifts to their mom? I, 29F, am married to my husband, 30M, and I'm really starting to feel frustrated with the family tradition that my husband has with his sister, 32F. Every year they buy gifts for their mom together, but the catch is that my husband always ends up paying for the entire thing. His sister doesn't contribute a dime but still presents the gifts as being from both of them. This has been the routine for years, and even though we've been married for a while now, it hasn't changed. Now, she picks the gifts, my husband foots the bill, and the gifts are still presented as being from both of them, me and her boyfriend included. I'm already feeling a bit weird about this tradition, especially since my husband and I have been managing our finances on our own and are working on a tight budget. We paid for our entire wedding ourselves, which his mom and sister didn't contribute to, by the way, and we're expecting a baby soon, so things are even tighter. I've been telling my husband that I want to be involved in the gift decisions if we're paying for it, especially now with our financial situation. I suggested that his sister either start contributing to the cost of the gifts or buy her own gifts for their mom, while we buy our own separate gift. After discussing it, my husband agreed with me, and we decided we would buy our own gift this Christmas. I had already been shopping for his mom's gift for weeks, carefully selecting something I thought she'd like and that fit within our budget. But then, I found out just this evening that his sister texted my husband yesterday and told him she wanted to buy their mom expensive Lululemon clothes for Christmas, and my husband just agreed to it without even talking to me first. I feel extremely frustrated and upset. It feels so unfair to me because his sister is 30, a nurse with a solid income, and she can afford to splurge on herself, yet she never spends a dime on her own mom or brother. She hasn't even bought anything for our baby, which is due soon. I'm upset because we always end up being the ones who pay for gifts for his mom and sister, and they never buy anything for us in return. It feels like we're being taken advantage of, and I have no say in the matter. When I brought this up to my husband, he acknowledged that he feels like he's being taken advantage of, but he also told me I was being overdramatic and petty for being upset. He said that his mom and sister are important to him, and his sister, being the baby of the family, has always been spoiled, so he doesn't mind footing the bill. He also mentioned that it's not a big deal and I should just let it go. So, am I the asshole for being upset about this situation? Am I overreacting? Or is it reasonable to expect his sister to contribute when it's a joint gift? Am I the asshole for downgrading my gift after I saw what she got me? This year was special for me because I landed my first full-time job after finishing school, and for the first time I had a steady income. With a real paycheck coming in, I wanted to make sure that I could buy thoughtful Christmas gifts for my family. I thought long and hard about what would be meaningful for each person, making sure to stick to a reasonable budget without overspending, although I did have to dip into savings I had set aside for a future apartment. Still, I wanted each gift to feel personal and special. To make things easier, we celebrated Christmas a few days early with my sister-in-law, Sil, and her family since she would be traveling out of town for the holidays. Beforehand, we set a gift budget between $50 and $100, which seemed like a fair amount. I carefully selected presents that I thought would be thoughtful and meaningful, and stayed within the agreed-upon range. For my sister-in-law, I decided to buy her a new Apple Watch band. She had mentioned that she didn't like the silicone bands that come with the watch, and her current gold band was outdated. I found a sleek gold metal band that I thought was just perfect for her taste, priced at $100, right at the top of the agreed budget. It was adjustable and seemed like the ideal gift. To make the presentation fun, I printed a picture of the band and put it inside a large box with a wrist sizer, so she could easily figure out the right fit. She loved it, and everything felt perfect. Then it was my turn to open her gift. She gave me a pair of hiking socks, which I actually really needed and appreciated. However, the price of the socks was $26, which was just a little over half of the $50 to $100 range we had agreed on. I was thankful for the thought, but the price difference left me feeling a little uncomfortable. I had spent $100 on her gift, and now, seeing that her gift was much less expensive, I started feeling the disparity more strongly. Later that day, when I went online to purchase the Apple Watch band I had originally picked out, I found a nearly identical band from a different brand on sale at Best Buy for only $45. The style, color, and quality seemed almost the same, and the reviews were great. So I decided to buy the cheaper version. I didn't think it would be right to spend so much more on her when her gift was so far below the price range we had agreed upon. When I gave her the new band, she seemed a little surprised that it wasn't in the original Apple-branded packaging. I explained that I found a similar band at a much better price and thought it was a great deal. She seemed okay with it at the time, and I thought everything was fine. However, a few hours later, my brother called me and was really upset. He accused me of bait and switching, claiming that I had intentionally downgraded her gift as payback for the socks she gave me. I tried to explain that it wasn't about trying to deceive her or get back at her. It was simply that after seeing how much she had spent on my gift, I didn't feel right continuing to spend $100 on her when her gift didn't meet the price expectations we had set. I told him that if she had spent at least $35 or $50 on my gift, I would have been happy to go ahead with the $100 Apple-branded band. Now, my brother is upset and says that he's going to buy the original $100 Apple band himself and wants me to return the $45 band and contribute to the cost. I agreed to return the band, but now I'm wondering if I was unreasonable. I know Christmas is supposed to be about more than just the price of gifts, but I really put effort into making sure I gave thoughtful presents, even though I'm just starting out in my career. It was discouraging to see my effort not reflected in return. For context, my sister-in-law and I work at the same company, but she makes more money than I do. She has no children or debt, and she's in a much more financially comfortable position, while I'm still starting out, trying to manage my money carefully and saving for future goals. So, am I the asshole for downgrading my gift after seeing what she got me? Am I the asshole for not allowing my boyfriend to sell my PS4 to buy a PS5 for us? Some background. I, 22, female, and my boyfriend, 27, male, have been together for 4 years, and we live together. We're very close, and while I love him, there's one issue that keeps coming up: gaming. I've been a gamer for years, even before we met. A few months before we started dating, he lost his console, and when we got together, I let him play on mine whenever he wanted. At first, it wasn't a problem. He'd play occasionally, and I'd still get plenty of time on my own console. But over time, the situation changed. He started playing almost every day, all day, whenever he got the chance. It's not that he's neglecting his responsibilities. Both of us work full-time, we clean and cook together, and we try to share household chores. However, when we're done with our daily tasks, he immediately grabs the controller and spends hours on my PS4. If I ask to play, there's always this attitude. He'll sit there, arms crossed, sighing loudly and shaking his head as I ask if I can play. It's almost like he's annoyed that I'm asking. This makes me feel bad every time, so I usually just give up and hand him the controller. The second I do, he's all smiles, and everything's fine again. He says the games I like to play are boring. Most of the time, I play Dragon's Dogma, which I've been playing for years. It's my comfort game, and I love it. But no matter how many times I try to explain the storyline or the appeal to him, he doesn't care for it. He only enjoys FPS, first-person shooter, games and hunting games. I've played those with him before, but I'm not a fan. I've done it because he wanted me to, but honestly, it's not my thing. Recently, he told me he wants to buy a PS5, and I was excited at first. I thought maybe he'd saved up enough money for it, and I'd finally get to have some time on my console again, without having to ask or feel guilty about playing. But then he dropped a bombshell. He wants to sell my PS4 to fund the PS5. Gaming is something I've loved for a long time, long before I even met him. It's a personal hobby that brings me comfort and joy, and I really don't want to give it up. We can't afford to buy a second console without selling the first, but I can't help but feel like, after 4 years of barely being able to play on my own console, it's going to get worse with the PS5. He'll likely be the one contributing the most money to it, and I fear he'll hog that one too. I had a breakdown over this. I went nonverbal for a while, which really worried him. He couldn't understand why I was so emotional about the situation. When I tried to explain that it's because I feel like it won't belong to me anymore, especially since he'll be the main contributor to the PS5 purchase, and I fear he'll let me play even less, he got really upset. Now, I'm left wondering, am I the asshole for not wanting to let him sell my PS4 to buy the PS5 for us? I just don't feel like I'm asking for too much, sometime on a console I own. But I'm also worried that my reluctance is making him feel like I'm being unfair. Am I the asshole for not inviting my estranged brother to my wedding? Context asterisk I, 29M, am getting married soon, and I'm facing a dilemma about inviting my estranged brother, 31M. We've been distanced for years due to his behavior, which includes acting out and being rude to people, especially those in the service industry. He has some untreated narcissistic traits that make it hard for me to have a relationship with him. A big part of why I moved out of state was to escape his influence. Our estrangement isn't just my side of the story, though. One of the main things that solidified our distance was his treatment of us at his wedding. Despite our strained relationship, he made me his best man, but didn't treat me like one. My fiancée and I flew to his wedding on our own dime, helped him with errands, and tried to be supportive. But when it came time for the wedding reception, there was a wedding party table, except we weren't seated at it. I didn't feel totally hurt by it at the time, but now looking back, it felt pretty deliberate. The worst part, though, was the DJ. My fiancée went up to request a song for a family member. We didn't want to bombard the DJ with requests, but was told that she wasn't allowed to make any requests. When I went up with her, the DJ specifically said, "You're the only people I'm not allowed to accept requests from." Not only was I singled out, but my fiancé's name was also listed as something completely inappropriate, a medical term for a device used for intubating obese patients. We were both horrified. Later, a relative told us this had been done intentionally by my brother. A year later, my fiancée confronted him about this while he was tipsy at a cigar bar. He admitted to changing her name on the guest list and apologized, but my fiancée has never felt like the apology was genuine. She's still extremely upset by how she was treated. The situation now, as I'm planning my own wedding, I'm faced with the decision of whether or not to invite him. On one hand, inviting him would maybe give us a chance to salvage a relationship, though I'm not sure it's even worth it given everything that's happened. On the other hand, not inviting him would make my fiancée happy, and she's understandably still very hurt. All of my friends are aware of how he's treated us, so I know they wouldn't be welcoming of him either. So, here's my dilemma. Invite my brother and risk creating chaos at my wedding, potentially upsetting my fiancé and starting drama. But this might also give me a chance to work on a relationship with my only sibling, despite the history. Don't invite my brother. Make my fiancé happy. Ensure the wedding is peaceful, but probably end any hope of mending my relationship with my brother forever. AITA for not inviting him? Edit/update * after thinking about this some more, I'm still torn. I want to make my fiancé happy, but I also don't want to close the door entirely on my relationship with my brother. However, I can't ignore the fact that his actions at his own wedding hurt both of us, and my fiancé still feels deeply disrespected. If I don't invite him, it feels like I'll be cutting ties completely, but at the same time, I want my wedding to be a day of joy, not drama. Am I the asshole for standing my ground against my parents' firm traditional views on Chinese New Year? Context: I, 30M, come from a traditional Chinese family, where cultural customs and hierarchy play a significant role. In our culture, there's a common expectation that once a woman marries, she marries into her husband's family, which often means that the woman's family is expected to take a back seat during important celebrations, including Chinese New Year, CNY. The male side of the family tends to take priority in these traditions. My wife, 29F, and I have been married for 2 years, and we decided early on that for major holidays like Chinese New Year, we would alternate celebrating between our respective families. One year we would spend CNY with my family. The next year we would spend it with hers. This arrangement felt fair to both of us, and we believe it reflects a more balanced approach for our generation. The issue: when I told my parents about this decision, they completely flipped out. They accused me of betraying them, abandoning my roots, and being poisoned by modern ideas like fairness, which they believe have no place in tradition. To them, honoring tradition means sticking to the old ways, and any change is seen as disrespectful. I've tried to talk to them and understand where their anger is coming from. I asked if they felt unloved or distant or if they needed more of my time, but they dismissed my concerns and refused to entertain any of my suggestions. They were adamant that I must celebrate Chinese New Year with them every year, and when I pushed back, they gave me an ultimatum. Either I attend CNY with them, alone, if necessary, or they would disown me. For me, this ultimatum was unacceptable. I refused to consider splitting up with my wife during such an important celebration. I believe we are a unit, and celebrating together is what makes the occasion special. As a compromise, I suggested that we could celebrate with my parents a day earlier, or perhaps on a different occasion when it wasn't their turn for CNY. Unfortunately, they rejected all of my proposals. The current situation: now, I am being labeled a traitor, a disappointment, and the one who is ruining the family's honor. It feels like I'm being forced to choose between my wife and my parents. I don't want to lose my relationship with my parents, but I also believe that the traditional way of doing things is outdated and needs to evolve. At this point, it feels like I am standing my ground for fairness and for my wife, even if it costs me my relationship with my parents. So, Reddit, AITA for insisting on alternating Chinese New Year celebrations between both families? I know my parents' views are rooted in culture and heritage, but I think it's time for some evolution. I don't want to hurt them, but I also need to protect my marriage and uphold the principles my wife and I share. Am I in the wrong for this? Should I be more willing to accommodate my parents' wishes? Or is my stance reasonable? Edit/update. Thank you all for the thoughtful responses. After reading many of the comments, I realized that the emotional toll this situation is taking on me is significant. I've always respected my parents, but it's clear that this issue goes beyond just tradition. It's about control and expectations. I'm going to try one last time to talk to them, but I'm more resolute now than ever about not compromising on the values I share with my wife. I appreciate everyone's input. Am I the asshole for refusing to invite my mother-in-law to Christmas? Context: I, 25, female, and my husband, 27 male, decided to host a big Christmas this year. We've never really done this before. Usually, during the holidays, we just visit family and then go our separate ways. This time, I was excited because I wanted to host a proper celebration. But there's one issue. I've never had a good relationship with my mother-in-law, MIL. She has always been difficult, ignorant, and lacking basic boundaries. In previous years, we've invited her over to join the festivities, but since we've never actually hosted a full Christmas dinner or party, it didn't feel as intimate. The invitation incident asterisk this year, I really wanted to give it a try. I wanted to make things work so we could all have a good time together. I was genuinely hopeful that we could get along for the holidays. I told my husband that I wanted to invite her, and he thought it was sweet, which made me happy. So, I called my MIL to extend the invite, thinking this would be a step in the right direction. But when I called, she responded in a very surprising way. She said, "Oh, finally, you make a great decision. I think it'll be your last one though," and then laughed. I didn't know what to say, and I was definitely caught off guard, but it didn't sit well with me. I told my husband what happened, and he just brushed it off, saying, "She's just like that." But I didn't want to just ignore the comment, especially considering the history of her remarks. So, I decided that I didn't want her in our home for Christmas anymore. When my husband was asleep, I sent her a polite message, explaining that we were keeping the group small this year and that it wouldn't be a good idea for her to come. The fallout asterisk, she replied saying that she thought it was rude to uninvite her, but that she'd let it pass. When my husband woke up, I told him what happened. He got mad because I hadn't spoken to him about it beforehand, but he said that if I felt uncomfortable, I should have told him. I reminded him that I had tried to bring it up before, but he dismissed my feelings. He then made a few snarky comments like, "Just ignore it," and went to work. Now I'm feeling conflicted. I've been putting up with my MAL's rude remarks for years, always brushing them off, but I couldn't ignore this one. Update asterisk, I'm relieved that she was uninvited, and she seemed to take it better than I expected. But now, I'm left feeling like no one understands why I needed to make this decision. My husband doesn't seem to take my discomfort seriously, and I'm just tired of trying to please everyone. So, am I the asshole for refusing to invite my MIL to Christmas after her rude comment, even though my husband is mad at me for not discussing it with him first? Edit asterisk, since posting, I've reflected a bit more. I feel guilty for not involving my husband sooner, but I was afraid of his dismissal of my feelings. I just couldn't put up with another holiday where I had to tolerate disrespect. I'm just looking for some perspective on whether I handled this poorly. Am I the asshole for not defending a girl I barely know after she was kicked out of the friend group for asking to be paid? I, 21, female, have a tight-knit group of 6 friends. About 2 months ago, a new girl, Jane, 22, female, joined our circle. It's worth noting that, within our group, we have an informal system of trading services with each other. For example, I might do a friend's nails for free, and they'll return the favor by doing my hair when I need it. The goal is for these trades to be roughly equal in value. For instance, if my hair costs £60, I'll trade doing nails worth £60 to £70. If the value of the services isn't quite balanced, we simply settle the difference. Like if my nails cost £100 and my friend's hair only costs £60, she'd pay me the £40 difference. The key point here is that these trades are voluntary. There's absolutely no obligation for anyone to do them, and as far as I know, no one in the group has ever been pressured into a trade. It's about helping each other out and doing nice things for your friends. Now Jane joined the group, and she quickly became interested in getting her nails done. She mentioned at one point that she couldn't afford to have them done professionally, so I offered her a trade. I'd do her nails if she could provide me with some clothes or accessories. Jane makes her own t-shirts, clothing, and accessories, so it seemed like a fair exchange. The total cost of the nails I did for her was £160, and in return, I chose about £70 worth of clothes. I told her that there was no need to worry about the £90 difference, as I was happy to let it go. Honestly, I thought it was a positive experience, and I enjoyed spending time with her, one-on-one. Then, everything took a turn on December 11th. I received a text from Jane apologizing for not realizing that she couldn't just give away £70 worth of her items. She said she needed me to pay her back immediately, or I'd have to return the clothes. I was really confused at first because I thought we had agreed on the trade, and I had been very clear about how it worked. I told her that I didn't have some of the smaller items anymore, as I had planned to gift them to my sister for her birthday. Jane continued texting me, demanding that I pay her back. I told her I would pay her as soon as I received my paycheck. At this point, Jane took things a step further by airing her grievances in our group chat, complaining that I hadn't paid her back. During the discussion, she accidentally revealed that it was a trade, and everyone told her that she couldn't back out of the agreement after the fact. Jane wasn't happy with this response, so she went on TikTok and made a public post accusing me of stealing from her and refusing to pay her back. As a result of her public accusations and the drama she stirred up, Jane was kicked out of the friend group. However, this situation has caused a divide among the rest of our friends. Half of them think I should have just paid her back, given that she seems to be struggling financially. They feel that it's the nice thing to do. The other half believes that I'm under no obligation to pay her, given that the trade was agreed upon in advance and that I never forced her into anything. Jane clearly feels that I've wronged her, and some of the others in the group share that sentiment. So, am I the asshole here? Edit. Some people have questioned why my nails cost £160. I do custom nail sets that involve intricate art, 3D elements, and construction, like charms and stamping, which can take hours to complete. If you're curious, you can look up artsy nails on Pinterest to get an idea of what I mean. Am I the asshole for not including my adult son's social time as work hours? Background asterisk, I am a 45-year-old woman. I'll refer to myself as I from here on. And I have a 23-year-old son who currently lives with me. Over the past few years, he's struggled with depression and has developed a screen time addiction, spending upwards of 80 hours a week gaming. He hasn't held a consistent full-time job for nearly 2 years now, and his only source of income has come from short-term, odd jobs. These jobs are primarily to cover personal expenses like paying for his car. However, he refuses to work in retail or food service positions and has no formal education or significant experience in the fields he claims to be interested in. A few weeks ago, my son approached me asking for a loan to cover his car insurance payment. When I checked his bank account, I saw he only had $2 in it. I was hesitant to give him the money because I didn't want him to fall into a debt trap, especially since he hasn't shown that he has a steady way to pay back loans or build financial independence. So, I told him no. However, I did try to meet him halfway by offering a compromise. I told him that if he could complete 10 hours of household chores, such as errands and tasks around the house, over the weekend, I would pay his car insurance and give him some additional funds to help him out. I also made it clear that if he didn't finish the 10 hours of work by Sunday night, I would take away the power cable to his laptop until the work was completed. He agreed to this arrangement. The situation asterisk on Saturday afternoon. My son had completed 5.5 of the 10 hours of household chores. He was feeling drained and frustrated, especially after working on a difficult assembly project I had assigned him. At this point, he asked me if he could skip a family concert outing we had planned for that evening. The concert was for both friends and family, and I thought it would be a good opportunity for him to spend some time outside of the house and away from his screen. I told him it was up to him, but I encouraged him to go, thinking that a break from screens and socializing in person might help his mental health. He agreed to join, although he wasn't particularly enthusiastic about it. During the concert, my son complained about the music and spent most of his time on his phone, rather than engaging with the event or the people around him. I ended up paying for his ticket, dinner, and drinks while we were out. Despite his outward signs of dissatisfaction, I still thought it was valuable for him to be out of the house and in a social setting. The next day, on Sunday, my son woke up at noon and announced that his work obligation had been fulfilled by attending the concert, as he had made an effort to socialize. He argued that this should count as part of his 10 hours of work. I disagreed, explaining that while I appreciated his effort to attend the outing, it didn't count as actual work. To me, work means contributing to the household in a practical, productive way, whether through chores, errands, or other tangible contributions. I explained that while spending time together was enjoyable, the concert was for his personal enjoyment and not a service to the household. This led to A heated disagreement. My son shut down emotionally, ignored my attempts to talk through the situation, and retreated to his room to play more video games. By the end of the day, the 10 hours of work had not been completed, and I had to follow through with my earlier promise to take away his laptop's power cable until he finished the work. The dilemma asterisk now, my son feels that the concert outing should count towards his work hours because he made an effort to socialize. In hindsight, I realize I might not have explained the terms clearly enough, though I felt it should have been obvious to him that work meant household chores and errands. Given everything that happened, I'm wondering if I was too rigid in my stance. So, am I the asshole for not considering his social time as part of the work hours? Context and considerations asterisk in this situation, it's clear there are underlying issues beyond just the specific question of whether social time should count as work. My son is an adult, but he still relies on me financially and seems to struggle with motivation and responsibility. While I want to support him, I also believe in holding him accountable for his actions, especially when it comes to developing responsibility and independence. I do feel for him, as I know he's dealing with depression and his addiction to gaming, but I also think it's important for him to understand that work isn't just about participating in social events. It's about fulfilling obligations that contribute to the household and his own personal growth. Am I the asshole for returning the Christmas gifts I ordered? I, 28F, have been in charge of organizing Christmas gifts for my grandparents' 6 other grandchildren for a while now. As the oldest grandchild, I'm 10 years older than most of them, with their ages ranging from 12 to 15. Over the years, this has become part of my responsibility. Our family recently built a house together, and now that I'm living with my grandparents, it's become even easier for me to coordinate the gift-giving process. The kids have pretty much caught on to the fact that I do all the work for Christmas gifts. I send them links to the gifts in a group chat with me and my grandma, and they select what they want. It's a fairly simple system, and everyone seems to be happy with it. But there's one cousin, 15M, who has been a bit tricky this year. He sent me his Amazon wishlist, which was pretty close to the budget for each child, and I thought that he was going to be the easiest one to shop for. I went ahead and ordered everything from his list, feeling confident that Christmas would be smooth sailing for him. A few days later, my brother, 17M, mentioned that our cousin had shown him how to check what had been bought off his Amazon wishlist. This was a red flag to me, but I didn't think much of it at the time. Then, just a few days ago, our cousin sent a text to my grandma saying that he was too old to sit around and open presents and would prefer an eBay gift card for the amount of his budget instead. He also claimed that he had never sent a wish list and that I must have bought him random things. At first, I was really annoyed by his message, but I tried to brush it off because, well, he was still going to get the things he wanted. But I couldn't stop thinking about it. After talking with my mom and my grandma, we started to wonder if maybe he was trying to pull a fast one on all of us. He might have been hoping to get double Christmas gifts, one from me and another from my grandma, since she usually gives him a separate gift. Knowing his history of trying to pull off similar tricks, I wouldn't put it past him. So, after a couple of weeks of mulling it over, I decided to return everything I had ordered from Amazon. I then bought him the eBay gift card he'd requested. It was an easy decision for me, and I felt like he was getting exactly what he wanted after all. But I have to admit, I'm kind of curious about how he'll react when he sees that all he got from me is a gift card, while his younger sisters will have a basket full of presents. I guess that's where I'm unsure whether I'm being unreasonable or not. It's entirely possible that I'm coming off as a bit petty, but I still feel like he got what he asked for. So, am I the asshole for returning the gifts I ordered and just getting him the gift card instead? Should I have just let it go and kept the presents? Or is he in the wrong for trying to manipulate the situation? Am I the asshole for refusing to apologize for a public display of affection I forgot I did? I, 24F, have been with my partner, 26M, since we were in high school. When we met, I was going through some very difficult times at home, which led to intense memory repression. Because of this, I often can only recall events before I turned 18 through photographs or what others tell me. This means my friends know that I have memory loss from that time in my life, and they often remind me about things I've said or done, especially during school. Recently, a couple of friends in my social circle, 27M and 29F, started dating, and became more openly affectionate with each other. At first, I didn't mind, but things took a turn when their PDA started getting NSFW. It was uncomfortable to the point that I couldn't even go to the movies with them without hearing sexual comments every 10 minutes. Finally, I told them that I was uncomfortable with the level of PDA and that I didn't want to hear details about their intimate relationship. The boyfriend of the couple, 27M, blew up at me. He accused me of being a hypocrite because, as he put it, when I was 15, I did the same thing with my partner at the time in front of the group. I was confused, so I asked him to explain further. He reminded me that I often engaged in PDA with my boyfriend back in high school. When I asked if it was NSFW, he said no, but the type of PDA didn't matter to him. According to him, I should apologize for it because I was asking them to stop doing the same things I did. I was taken aback and, honestly, didn't know how to respond. I told him I couldn't change the past and that we were all adults now. He insisted that I apologize for the PDA I did when I was younger. Here's where I stood my ground. I told him I couldn't apologize for something I didn't even remember doing. It felt disingenuous to apologize for an event I have no memory of, so I refused. I did tell him that I was sorry I'd forgotten, but I wouldn't apologize for something I didn't recall. I also suggested that I'd make it up to him by finding another way to address his concerns in the present, but he rejected this and walked away, still upset. Meanwhile, their NSFW PDA continued, even though I made it clear that I was uncomfortable. He often teased me about how bothered I seemed, but they didn't stop. I asked my boyfriend, 26M, about the situation, and he confirmed that we did engage in PDA when we were younger, but he emphasized that it wasn't nearly as extreme or sexual as what my friends were doing now. Despite that, I'm still standing by my decision not to apologize. I feel frustrated that I forgot those details and didn't know my actions had bothered anyone at the time. I also feel like apologizing now without remembering it would just be empty and unfair to me. So, am I the asshole for refusing to apologize for something I forgot I did? Am I the asshole for not driving my sister to the airport? I was house-sitting for my parents while they were overseas. My sister was also visiting from another state, and about a week before her departure, she messaged both my brother and me, asking if either of us could drop her off or pick her up from the airport. Her flight was in the early morning, and since I had just started a new job that required early hours, I knew I wouldn't be able to do it. I told her this clearly when she first asked, and to my understanding, she accepted this. This is important. Fast forward to the Sunday before her departure. I was already having a stressful day and was out for most of it when I received another message from my sister. She was once again asking if I could drive her to the airport the next morning. To remind her, I had already told her a week ago that I couldn't do it because of my work schedule. The airport was also on the opposite side of town from where I worked, which would make it impossible to get to work on time. Despite this, I reiterated, "Sorry, I can't do it." She then began to complain, suggesting I could just wake up earlier to drop her off and park at my work. She knew I had to deal with limited and very expensive parking in an area next to two major schools, which would cost me about $40 a day, and that I wouldn't make it to work on time. I told her once again, I can't, but she kept insisting. At that point, I was overwhelmed, so I put the phone down and said, "We'll talk later." When I got home, barely a few seconds after walking in the door, she was demanding once more that I drive her to the airport. Again, I said, "Sorry, I can't." And then, she started berating me, calling me selfish and ungrateful, saying I never help the family and that I never go out of my way to support anyone. I got defensive and, in a weak moment, mentioned that I had helped her out recently when I looked after her daughter, my niece, for an entire day just a few weeks earlier without any prior notice, only being told 5 minutes before she had to leave. Looking back, I know I shouldn't have said this, but it came out in the heat of the moment. Immediately, she started laughing mockingly and accused me of saying her daughter was a burden and that I hated her. She then went on to mock my struggle with alcoholism, which I'm still recovering from. That stung deeply. At this point, I left the room. I don't know why I stayed as long as I did, but eventually, I heard her talking downstairs, becoming increasingly emotional. turned out she was on the phone with our parents, who were overseas. The conversation went exactly as expected. She made her case to them, and later that evening, she arranged for my brother to take her to the airport the next morning. He agreed, but told her they needed to leave at a specific time to avoid any issues. The next morning, my brother arrived on time, but my sister didn't leave until 20 minutes later, which would have made me at least an hour late for work had I driven her. Then, my father sent me a message, saying I needed to apologize because family is important. I didn't apologize. So, my question is, am I the asshole for not driving my sister to the airport? Am I the asshole for lying to my ex-boyfriend about what I had been doing since we broke up? I, 22F, broke up with my now ex-boyfriend, 28M, about a month ago. We had been together for almost a year, and for about half of that time we were living together in my apartment. Our relationship had been on the rocks for a while, and there were a few times we almost broke up before it finally happened. He ended things with me through a text message after moving out of my apartment in a single day and going back to live with his parents. He said the reason he broke up with me was because ever since he quit his job, he felt unstable. He mentioned that living with me had made him feel pressured to provide for me financially, which honestly confused me, because I never once asked him to pay rent or any of the bills. When he broke up with me, I didn't try to stop him or beg him to stay. The only thing I asked was if we could talk in person after he had some time to think things through, since I thought breaking up through a text message was really disrespectful. He agreed, and we went no contact for a couple of weeks after that. During this time, I tried to distract myself by spending time with some new friends I had made. One of them was a male coworker who immediately reached out to hang out after hearing about the breakup. To be completely honest, I knew what his intentions were when he invited me out, but I wasn't planning on doing anything with him. I think I was just craving some attention and an ego boost, so I agreed to hang out with him. However, things didn't go as I expected. I ended up drinking way too much, and to my surprise, I woke up in his apartment the next morning. I don't remember anything after the drinks started flowing at the restaurant, but when I looked at my neck, I could guess what had likely happened. A few days after that incident, my ex texted me offering to help me move to a new apartment. Since I didn't have enough strength to do the move alone, I agreed. On moving day, I wore a turtleneck to cover up the marks on my neck. LOL. After we finished moving, we talked for a bit, and he asked me what I had been up to. I told him I had just been going out with friends. Then he brought up the male coworker and asked if anything had happened between us. I told him that he had just asked me out. I thought that was the end of it, but a few days ago, after a couple weeks of not seeing each other, we met up again, and he asked me about the coworker once more. This time, I lied and said I never replied to his messages. He jokingly said, "Imagine if you came here today, and your neck was just covered in hickeys?" I laughed it off, but I could tell he was a little hurt by the comment, and now I feel guilty because I think he knows something happened. I've been feeling like I'm walking on eggshells, and I don't know whether I should just tell him the truth at some point. Here's the thing, I still love him. Ever since the breakup, I've been hoping we could work things out, and I've been trying to get him back. After our first meetup following the breakup, I felt like there was still a chance for us to get back together. However, he told me that he wasn't ready to commit to anything and that if the time is right, he'll come back to me. So, right now, we're just trying to stay friends and have stayed in contact. But I feel really guilty about lying to him, especially because I think he might know something happened with the coworker. I'm not sure whether I did the right thing by lying, and I'm torn between wanting to tell him the truth and keeping my feelings to myself so I don't push him away further. So, am I the asshole for lying to him? Should I come clean or just leave it in the past? Am I the asshole for telling my mother not to use alternative remedies on my son? I, 30F, can't stop thinking about a recent disagreement I had with my mother, 60s, after she babysat my son, 1-year-old, overnight while my husband and I went out with friends. My son had been sick with a cold for over a week at the time, and I was initially going to stay home with him, but my mother insisted that we go out. I warned her that my son hadn't been sleeping well because of his illness and that if he woke up with a fever, she should give him some medicine to help lower it and offer him water. I also mentioned that once the medicine kicked in, he would likely settle back to sleep. Originally, the plan was for my mother to come to our house to babysit, but she asked to watch him at her place instead. So we agreed, and after a 3-hour round trip, we dropped him off at her house, and she brought him back the next day. The next day, when I asked her how the night went, she told me that it was awful. He was feverish and coughing a lot and didn't sleep much. I asked her if she gave him the medicine I suggested, and she said she did. But when it didn't seem to help, she told me that she had cut up an onion and put it in his socks, claiming that he hadn't coughed since. She said this with a sense of pride, almost as if she was defying me. Here's the thing. I'm not against trying remedies, but I'm deeply uncomfortable with where she got this idea from. She got it from someone she follows on Facebook, a woman named Dr. Barbara O'Neill, who has no medical qualifications and promotes dangerous and unsubstantiated alternative medicine claims. My mother has shared this kind of information before, and this was the first time she decided to try it herself on my son. Now, here's where I might have messed up. I asked her where she got the idea from, and when she said it was from Dr. Barbara O'Neill, I flatly told her, "No more Barbara O'Neill." I wasn't angry, but I was firm because I know this woman's views and credentials or lack thereof, and I didn't want my son exposed to any more of these potentially harmful remedies. My mother got really upset. She told me that I didn't understand how worried she was, that she thought my son might vomit from coughing so hard, and she felt desperate. I told her that I understood because my son had been the same way for the past week, but I felt that this wasn't the right approach. There was some back and forth where she seemed to feel defensive, and although she reluctantly agreed to stop using these alternative remedies, I didn't feel like she was truly sincere. I'm worried that next time she'll just do it again behind my back and not tell me about it. Now, my husband thinks I might have overreacted. He agrees with my concern but believes I should have waited for a better time to address it. After all, my mom did us a huge favor by babysitting and driving 3 hours to drop him back off. I'm really grateful for that, and I did thank her. But at the same time, I felt it was important to address the issue immediately rather than letting it slide. So, Reddit, am I the asshole for confronting my mother about using alternative remedies on my son and telling her to stop? Should I have waited for a more appropriate time to address my concerns? Or was I right to say something right away? Would I be the asshole if I don't invite my cousin to my wedding? I am recently engaged and currently in the midst of planning my wedding. My dad has a large family, but on my mom's side, it's just her, my grandma, my aunt, and one cousin. To be honest, I don't have the best opinion of my cousin. Growing up, I didn't pay much attention to him because of the age gap between us, and because he wasn't very involved in the family. He'd show up at Christmas just in time to open his gifts, and then leave right afterward, barely engaging with anyone. But as I've gotten older and we've crossed paths more as adults, I've realized that he seems to have inherited all of the worst traits from his parents. He's incredibly self-absorbed, acts superior to everyone else, and yet, he has significant issues with gambling and alcohol. Most troubling, though, is how openly hostile he has been toward my mom recently. He's been belittling her and even threatening her over disagreements she's been having with my aunt. My mom's relationship with her sister has always been tense. My aunt has always been my grandparents' golden child, and consequently, her son, the cousin I'm talking about, has always been their favorite grandchild. I love my aunt, but she has a history of causing tension between her and my mom. She knows that no matter what happens, or who starts it, Grandma will always take her side. And so, my mom has to do the emotional heavy lifting and try to fix things every single time. Things have gotten even worse since my grandpa passed away. My aunt has been unbearable. After Grandpa died, Grandma moved out of her house, but not before my aunt essentially raided the place, taking anything of value, selling it, and keeping all the money. When Grandma tried to give my brother Grandpa's truck, since he doesn't have a car, my aunt made it so difficult that they had to argue about it for weeks before finally letting her sell it. Meanwhile, everything with sentimental value from Grandpa, his veteran's flag, his medals, and the pocket knife he carried daily, was given to my cousin. I, on the other hand, was given a random mug I had never even seen before. I might have let the inheritance situation slide, if not for one thing. When my grandpa passed away, my cousin didn't show up. He didn't come to the funeral, didn't offer any support, didn't even bother to attend. I was there with my fiancé and my brother, dealing with our own grief, but also supporting my grandma and aunt, despite the issues between them. During that time, I overheard a phone call where my grandma, an 80-year-old woman who had done everything for him over the years, bailing him out of jail, taking him in when his parents abandoned him, and always being there for him, pleaded with him in tears to come be with her, and he refused. He couldn't even be bothered to show up for her. Now, I'm planning my wedding, and my fiancé is adamant that my cousin shouldn't be invited. He said, if he doesn't want to be a part of this family, then he doesn't have to. If he won't cry with us, he doesn't get to laugh with us. Honestly, I agree with him. I don't want someone who has been so disrespectful to my family, and particularly to my mom, to be part of such an important day for me. The issue is that if I don't invite him, the fallout could be severe. My aunt would never forgive me, and my grandma would likely be devastated that I've chosen to exclude him. My mom, however, hasn't asked me to not invite him. She doesn't want more conflict, and I understand that, but at the end of the day, it's my decision to make. There's also the chance that, even if I do invite him, he won't come anyway. He's been so detached from the family that it might be more trouble than it's worth to even extend the invitation. It could end up causing unnecessary drama where there doesn't need to be any. So, am I the asshole if I choose not to invite him, considering all the bad blood? Or should I just go ahead and invite him to avoid causing a rift in the family? Am I the asshole for arguing with a friend and now another friend is accusing me of talking behind his back? Not the asshole. A few days ago, I, female 23, had a heated argument with my friend, male 25, and now another friend, female 23, is accusing me of talking badly about him behind his back. Let me explain the situation in detail. The argument with my friend started because he's been making comments and acting in ways that have made me uncomfortable. For example, he tends to make flirtatious jokes, and when I don't laugh or respond the way he expects, he tells me I'm the one making things awkward. He can also be really touchy at times, which I've made it clear I don't like. The final straw was when he drunkenly texted me a week ago. We were both out with our separate groups of friends, and I was upset because I had set clear boundaries with him before, letting him know that I only see him as a friend. I was already on edge, thinking he might confess something while drunk, but all he sent me was a typo-ridden message with my name and then texted, "Oops." I don't remember what that was for the next day. I was pretty upset, and when I showed him that, he just ignored it and avoided the conversation. After that, I couldn't help but be passive-aggressive toward him, even though I didn't mean to be. When he noticed, it led to a huge fight where I explained that my feelings were hurt by his behavior, especially the drunk text, and how I felt like he didn't respect my boundaries. He called me toxic and accused me of overreacting. The next evening, he apologized and we're fine now, but the dynamic has shifted, and I can't go back to hanging out with him the same way as before. Here's where it gets more complicated. I've been part of a close friendship trio with him and another girl, female, 23, for the past 3 months. During the whole situation with my friend, I talked to the girl because I trust her and see her as a friend. I explained how I felt hurt by my friend's behavior and asked if she thought I was overreacting. She told me that she didn't want to give an opinion because she felt uncomfortable, so I respected that and didn't push further. The following day, I asked her for advice again because I wanted to make peace with him, but I didn't want to be the one to initiate it since he had said some hurtful things on the phone. She didn't reply to my message. Now I feel guilty for being pushy, but I didn't know who else to turn to, and I thought she could at least offer some advice. Today, I texted her that my friend and I had made up, but she replied with something along the lines of, "Well, yes, but after the things you said about him, it's awkward now." I was really taken aback. I've never said anything bad about him to her, other than explaining how his actions made me uncomfortable. I never trashed him or talked behind his back. Then she told me she was disappointed that I talked about him after a minor conflict, and even mentioned that I had spoken to other people who know him about it. To clarify, I haven't discussed the situation in any great detail with anyone, except for a mutual friend we have, and even then all I mentioned was that we had a misunderstanding, and I felt guilty for being cold to him. I just don't understand why she's trying to make me out to be the bad guy for talking to her about the situation. I made it clear I wasn't trying to change her mind about him, but only wanted her perspective on what happened. I wasn't trying to gossip or talk shit about him. I just needed someone to talk to. I feel bad for not just letting it go, but I didn't have anyone else who could understand the situation. To make matters more complicated, these are people I see every day at work, and I'm not sure how to handle it. I even told my friend that I had asked her for her opinion, and he said he understood. I feel really stupid for involving her in the first place, and now I feel like everything has turned into a mess. So, am I the asshole for asking my friend for advice and talking about my friend's behavior with others? Am I the asshole for telling my boyfriend off about his best friend? Not the asshole, but your approach could have been more constructive. I understand your frustration with Tyler's friend Sarah and how her behavior impacts you, especially with your autism and OCD, which make your living space and social interactions important to your well-being. It's completely valid to feel upset when your plans are interrupted, and to ask for boundaries around your shared space. However, yelling at Tyler and making him cry, especially in front of Sarah, may have been a bit too harsh. It sounds like you were trying to voice your feelings, but your frustration came out in a way that may have been overwhelming for him. His friendship with Sarah seems to be a complicated issue, especially with her views, and it's understandable why you'd want him to take your concerns seriously. It might help to have a calm, open conversation with Tyler about the situation and your feelings, rather than letting it escalate into conflict. You have every right to express your discomfort, but try to do so in a way that fosters understanding rather than causing harm to your relationship. Am I the asshole for telling my little cousin no to helping me in the kitchen? Not the asshole. I, 14, female, was making strawberry shortcake for my family when my little cousin, 3, female, came into the kitchen. She was eyeing the strawberries and whipped cream, so I told her I'd give her some once I was finished, and in the meantime I gave her a few cut strawberries. I stepped out for a second, and when I came back, she had pulled her stool up to the counter, probably to sneak some more of my stuff. She's a bit hard-headed like that. Her mom, my aunt, told me that my cousin wanted to help, and I politely told her no because I was doing everything myself and didn't really need assistance. She was mostly just trying to eat everything I was working with. Then my mom came in and asked why my cousin couldn't help me. I repeated that I wanted to do it myself. But instead of letting it go, my mom kept insisting that I let her do something, even if it was just a small task. Meanwhile, my little cousin was helping herself to my strawberries and sticking her dirty hands into my whipped cream. Definitely not helpful. I was getting more frustrated, especially since my mom and grandma were laughing at the situation like it was funny. I had already said no, and it felt like they weren't respecting my boundaries. I got upset and told them to go away, which, yeah, probably wasn't the best move. But I was frustrated. Then they all got mad at me, saying things like, "She's just a baby," as if that was supposed to make me feel better. I stormed out twice, and at one point, I told them to just do it themselves if they wanted things to go the way they wanted. Honestly, the whole situation was getting on my nerves because I felt like I was being disrespected. I even argued back, saying that I had already told her no and that we should be teaching her that when someone says no, they mean it. But then I started feeling like maybe I was being dramatic. Why was it such a big deal for me to want to make the dessert on my own? Things got even worse after that. My mom is upset with me, and my grandma isn't talking to me for the rest of the night because I accidentally knocked down her shower curtains. They were already loose. Seriously? Not my fault. So now I'm stuck here wondering if I overreacted. I'm not mad at my little cousin. She's just a kid. But I am frustrated with my mom and grandma because they kept pushing her on me after I had already said no. It feels like they're enabling her bad behavior, and then they wonder why she doesn't listen to boundaries. So, am I being dramatic or am I in the right here? I just need someone to tell me if I'm crazy or if this makes sense. I'm literally typing this with frustrated tears in my eyes because I thought it'd be funny to ask for some perspective. My 35F husband, 40M, threw our toddler, 3M, onto the couch in anger. Am I worried over nothing? Earlier this week, my husband, we've been together around 16 years, married for 10 years, got upset with our 3-year-old son and threw him into the couch. He then proceeded to call him a PR**** and yell and scream at him. I was on the other side of the house with our 3-month-old daughter but came running in when I heard the screams from my husband and the cries from our son. My husband proceeded to yell at me to leave, but I refused to leave until he told me what happened and calmed down. I didn't want to leave both of them together alone. After a few minutes of him yelling and cussing at me, he left. When I spoke to my son, he said his dad picked him up and threw him onto the couch from several feet away, and that he hit his head on the center console, which is kind of hard. I chatted with him a bit more, and then he asked to snuggle with both mama, daddy, and little sister. So we walked over to find my husband. He thought it was just me at first, so when the door opened, he screamed, "Get the F*** out," but calmed down once he saw that our son was who opened the door to the room. After asking several times what happened, he finally told me that our son wasn't listening, was difficult during a poopy diaper change, and was running around instead of getting ready for bedtime, so he got mad. We talked a bit more. He was still very angry at me, but calmer with our son, so I told him that we can talk more after our son was asleep. My husband didn't want to talk, but finally agreed after he put our son to sleep. I asked him a few times if anything else happened, and he told me no. My son sometimes embellishes, but he was so emotional about being thrown, so I believed him and decided to share what he said. My husband immediately said that he didn't throw him but tossed him. He also said that our son was lying about hitting his head on the console, as he intentionally threw him on the pillow, which was next to the console, so he would not get hurt. I asked him why he didn't tell me before, and he really didn't answer. Even though our son ultimately was fine, throwing him in anger really scares me. Ever since this has happened, I've been worried about if this is a red flag, how to make sure this doesn't happen again, if I'm overreacting by worrying about this, etc. I guess I'm just looking for others' perspective because my husband didn't seem to think this was a big deal. For additional context, my dad was verbally and physically abusive towards me. It started out with him yelling and screaming and moved towards him grabbing me and physically harming me. My mom didn't really do anything to prevent it, and I don't want to repeat my childhood with my kids. I don't know if my past is making me overreact to this though, and I don't want to confront my husband further and break trust if I'm just projecting my past on the situation. TLDR. Husband tossed son on couch in anger and didn't tell me until I shared what my son told me about the situation. Husband's version differs slightly from son's. I'm not sure if I am making a big deal out of nothing. I, 24M, lost my temper last night over comments made by my mum, 43F. There is a lot of context behind the comments and the situation we are in which left us both emotional, so I will go through the summary of the situation. 3 years ago, my parents divorced due to my dad having a secret affair for over a year. Our family was broken for a while until we managed to pull through together. My mum even has a new boyfriend who is a really good guy, and everything has been going well. My mum does want me to carry on having a relationship with my dad, which I did as well even with what happened. So I meet up with my dad every now and then, at maximum once a month. I know other people may have never seen their dad again after what happened, but being an important figure in my life for over 20 years has made this incredibly difficult to do. I will also add a big part that I have straight up refused to meet my dad whenever he is with his partner, the woman he had an affair with, for obvious reasons. Sometimes it's hard enough to face my dad, but the thought of this other woman knocks me sick. Now it goes on to last night. Last night I went out drinking with my family, and later on it was just me, my mum, and my mum's boyfriend. Out of the blue, my mum takes a turn, she had too much to drink, and begins targeting me, making nasty comments and accusing me of building a relationship with my dad's new partner, who I have never even met or ever planning to meet, never mind a relationship with. After trying to explain that there is nothing to worry about, my mum crosses the line by saying she would disown me. She kept going on nasty comment after nasty comment until I snapped. I stood up, told her to stop drinking to this point, and that I will be packing my bags and leaving for good if her and my dad carry on putting this pressure on me like they have done for years. I am not the type of person to have confrontation, and I have very rarely lost my temper. But it was far too much to handle. I have had many sleepless nights over my family's situation, so it's something that seriously gets to me. I am reasonable, and I understand my mum does feel upset and confused still. However, comments like this need to stop because it's making me stressed and worried. TLDR, 24M, lost my temper last night over comments made by my mum, 43F, after a nasty divorce 3 years ago. My 41M wife, 37F, has insane mood swings, yells at me over everything, and I just want to feel loved again. TLDR. I don't love or even particularly like my wife anymore. She complains about everything I do, gets visibly upset at me in front of our friends, and arguably worst of all argues in front of my daughter. I've 41M, been with my wife 37F for around 15 years or so, and everything was great although she was a little busy with work. 8 years ago we got married, and then 6 years ago had a daughter who is absolutely incredible. However, after that I feel like my wife has completely changed, or at least shown me who she really was all along. I don't know. I thought it might be temporary due to post-birth hormones, but no, it just keeps going on and on. Rather than explain all of it, here are 4 out of many events that happened that seem on the unfair side to me. 1. We were over at a family friend's house and we ordered/went to pick up food with a guy friend of mine. We got there, immediately paid/got the food, and headed back. When I got back, I dropped off the food and I said I had to go to the bathroom real quick. My wife started yelling at me in front of everyone, asking me why I didn't go to the bathroom at the restaurant when we went to pick up the food. I said we didn't have time, and also why does it even matter? She told me I intentionally waited until I got back to go to the bathroom because that way I could avoid helping set up the table. This conversation continued after we got home and the next morning. 2. I visited my dad in another country who is going through early onset dementia and had a stroke at 70 years old. While I was there, I had a severe stomach ache, diverticulitis related, to the point where I was hospitalized for 3 days. I got calls from friends and family wishing me the best. I also got a call from my wife, who yelled at me for never finishing all of the leftovers. I sat there in my hospital bed, IVs sticking out of me, listening to her complain for 30 minutes about how weeks ago I didn't eat all of the leftovers. I understand she was probably stressed because she had to take care of our daughter by herself for like 10 days. But Jesus. 3. Outside of the aforementioned trip to take care of my dad, she rarely takes our daughter out by herself, even though I take her places by myself all the time, at least half a day every week to give my week some time to herself. However, when my wife takes our daughter somewhere, they always end up having a huge fight, which culminates in my wife getting upset at me. On the rare occasion my wife does take her somewhere, they'll go out, I'll clean up the house, do laundry, dishes, whatever, and when she gets back the first thing she does is start yelling at me because I didn't turn off the hallway light as our daughter runs to her room crying over God knows what, which I end up defusing. Keep in mind our daughter hasn't cried when it was just me and her since she was like 2 years old. 4. One time I spent all Saturday organizing our house for people who were coming over the next day. My wife didn't do too much of anything through the day other than go to park with me and my daughter and play on her phone. When nighttime came around, my wife started to cook for tomorrow while I played some games. She got upset at me to the point where she held up a knife and threatened me. I had no idea what she was going to do, so I recorded it. She ran over to me without the knife now, not to say, I'm not going to do anything, or, I'm sorry I didn't mean to physically threaten you, but to yell at me to delete the video. I still have this video, and sent it to a friend I trust. I know if you're reading this you think she was upset that I wasn't cooking with her, and she probably was, but she spent the whole day telling me that she was going to cook X and Y and Z, and that since I was the one cleaning up the place I could relax if I wanted. Also keep in mind if I stepped foot in the kitchen and tried to help, she would just tell me I was slowing her down. Also keep in mind I used to cook all the time, and still do for my daughter when it's just us. I just have no idea. We live in a country where family counseling isn't really a thing, but honestly I don't even care at this point. I've said multiple times I want to get a divorce assuming we get 50-50 split of our daughter, and she refused, saying she couldn't afford the house by herself. I said I'd pay for the house and she still refused. We get into arguments in front of my daughter, and even though I say, hey, can we take a break here and just think things over for a bit, she refuses and wants to talk about whatever problem she has now. The saddest part is now when we fight my daughter drops whatever she's doing to bring her mom a blanket and a glass of milk, telling her it'll be okay and not to be angry anymore. I have my own problems for sure. I only cook when it's just me and my daughter about half the week, because my wife criticizes everything I make / how I cook, so eventually I just gave up. I asked her, I'd like to cook for us again, but can you promise to not criticize anything I make and just let me do my own thing? She said no, she can't promise that. So I don't cook for the family. I also have a minor tic my anxiety that makes it so I sometimes clear my throat a lot. That bothered the hell out of her, but recent medicine I've been taking helps a ton. Me not making the noise didn't change anything. I also barely clean anything compared to her. I vacuum and do 100% of the laundry, but for example, I don't wash the curtains and my wife cleans the bathroom more than I do. But at the same time, she never organizes anything, ever. To emphasize how bad this is, before we got married, when she lived by herself, her mom had to come over twice a month to clean her house. So I have to organize my stuff, my wife's stuff, and my daughter's stuff. This includes clothes, my wife's jewelry, the cabinets, the kitchen, everything. It's just so messed up. I go out on some weekends with my friend and we go drinking and sometimes meet women, but I mean, I'd never go out on a date or cheat or anything like that. It just feels good to get positive attention from someone. If I could get divorced and have 100% control of my daughter, I would do that in a heartbeat. But my daughter still loves her mom, obviously, so that wouldn't work. 50-50, I feel like, would come with its own set of problems. I just want to get out of this relationship and feel loved again by someone outside of my daughter. Am I the asshole for not coming home for Christmas? So, I 30s have a wife and 3 young children, one of whom is under 1 year old. My family lives on the opposite coast, and we've made a strong effort to visit them every Christmas, except for 1 year when my wife had just given birth to our second child during the height of the COVID pandemic. We also usually visit at least one other time a year for different reasons: weddings, funerals, holidays, etc. We've always made it a priority to fly back for these visits, and we've always welcomed family and friends into our home, offering to host when needed. But this year, we've already been back home 5 times for various events: funerals, Easter, weddings, and so on. The most recent visit was just last month. On top of that, I recently got sick with some kind of virus, which my kids then caught, and we're only just now starting to feel better. Financially, things are tight. My wife took maternity leave for our 3rd child, and my job has been unstable this year. The tickets to fly home for Christmas are more than both of us have in our bank accounts right now. We haven't had a vacation at all this year, just a lot of travel for family events. So, I made the decision that we weren't going to be able to make the trip this year. I told my family, and while I was incredibly sad and embarrassed about it, I thought they would understand that we've already been home 5 times this year, and it's just not financially feasible. The response I got was hurtful. My family didn't seem to care about our reasons at all. I was told that this was poor planning on my part and that I should have skipped an earlier visit if I knew we couldn't afford the trip. My mom was upset, saying she puts a lot of effort into making Christmas special and that it wasn't fair to change the plans this late in the year. She even offered to loan me the money for the tickets, but I told her that I can't even afford gifts for my wife and kids right now, and we've already accumulated some credit card debt this year. My brother also jumped in, saying that this was an impulsive decision and that, from the outside, we seem like we have enough money to travel. He said they had no idea we were struggling financially and that this was news to them. I feel really hurt and angry about how they responded. I thought they'd be more understanding, but instead, I feel like I'm being judged and that my reasons are being dismissed. I'm struggling with what to do next, whether I should feel guilty for not going or if I'm in the right to prioritize my family's financial stability and well-being. So, AITA for deciding not to come home for Christmas? Should I have tried harder to make it happen? Or is my decision reasonable given the circumstances? Am I the asshole for accepting inheritance from my deadbeat father? I'm a 19-year-old guy, and I don't have many memories of my real father. The last one I can recall is when I was about 6, hiding under the kitchen table while he was yelling at my mom. He was an awful man with an alcohol problem. Eventually, he fled the country and I never saw him again. After that, my mom met my stepdad, who's been an amazing father figure to me and raised me as his own. Recently, I received a formal notice from my real father, who is still alive, but not really in the picture. He informed me that his mother, my grandmother, had passed away, and while he didn't expect me to attend the funeral, since I didn't even know her, he decided to leave me her apartment. He admitted in the letter that he had been a terrible father, acknowledged his mistakes, and said this was the least he could do after not being a part of my life. He also said he didn't expect me to contact him or anything. To be honest, I was excited. The apartment could make it a lot easier to get started in life, and I told my family about it. But instead of being supportive, they all reacted negatively. They kept telling me how awful my real father was and how I shouldn't accept anything from him because of how bad he treated us. And they're right, he was a terrible person. My mom is particularly upset. She's worried that by accepting the inheritance, I might be opening the door for him to contact me again or, worse, think that I owe him something. She also suggested that he might be trying to set up some sort of guilt trap, claiming that I should take care of him in his old age since he took care of me by giving me this apartment. I talked to a pro bono lawyer who reassured me that accepting the inheritance doesn't obligate me to anything, especially not in terms of child support, which my real father never paid. The lawyer told me that accepting the apartment would not make me responsible for anything related to my father, so I wouldn't owe him anything just by taking what he left me. Despite this, my parents, especially my stepdad, are still mad at me. My stepdad believes I should honor my mother's wishes and reject the inheritance, which seems like a waste to me. I get where he's coming from, but I think it would be foolish to turn down a chance to make my life easier. I don't want to upset my family, but I also think this is a rare opportunity that could really help me out. So, AITA for accepting the apartment from my real father, even though everyone is mad at me? Am I the asshole for accepting inheritance from my deadbeat father? I'm a 19-year-old guy, and I don't have many memories of my real father. The last one I can recall is when I was about 6, hiding under the kitchen table while he was yelling at my mom. He was an awful man with an alcohol problem. Eventually, he fled the country and I never saw him again. After that, my mom met my stepdad, who's been an amazing father figure to me and raised me as his own. Recently, I received a formal notice from my real father, who is still alive, but not really in the picture. He informed me that his mother, my grandmother, had passed away, and while he didn't expect me to attend the funeral, since I didn't even know her, he decided to leave me her apartment. He admitted in the letter that he had been a terrible father, acknowledged his mistakes, and said this was the least he could do after not being a part of my life. He also said he didn't expect me to contact him or anything. To be honest, I was excited. The apartment could make it a lot easier to get started in life, and I told my family about it. But instead of being supportive, they all reacted negatively. They kept telling me how awful my real father was and how I shouldn't accept anything from him because of how bad he treated us. And they're right, he was a terrible person. My mom is particularly upset. She's worried that by accepting the inheritance, I might be opening the door for him to contact me again or, worse, think that I owe him something. She also suggested that he might be trying to set up some sort of guilt trap, claiming that I should take care of him in his old age since he took care of me by giving me this apartment. I talked to a pro bono lawyer who reassured me that accepting the inheritance doesn't obligate me to anything, especially not in terms of child support, which my real father never paid. The lawyer told me that accepting the apartment would not make me responsible for anything related to my father, so I wouldn't owe him anything just by taking what he left me. Despite this, my parents, especially my stepdad, are still mad at me. My stepdad believes I should honor my mother's wishes and reject the inheritance, which seems like a waste to me. I get where he's coming from, but I think it would be foolish to turn down a chance to make my life easier. I don't want to upset my family, but I also think this is a rare opportunity that could really help me out. So, AITA for accepting the apartment from my real father, even though everyone is mad at me? Am I the asshole for not giving my friend a refund? I, 26F, am a hairstylist who specializes in color correction. Recently, one of my friends, 28F, booked an appointment with me for this service. About a week before her appointment, we met for a consultation, during which she explained exactly what kind of look she wanted. I carefully listened to her request and, after evaluating her hair, I explained that her desired result would be very complex. Achieving it would require multiple sessions because color correction isn't something that can always be done in one go, especially if the hair has been previously colored or damaged. After our consultation, I sent her a follow-up text to recap everything we discussed. In this message, I clearly outlined that the desired result would take multiple appointments. She responded by sending me a TikTok video of a hair color transformation, saying, "This is what I want. I took the time to explain that the video showed a client with very different hair than hers, and the results shown were achieved over several sessions, not just one. I also reassured her that I would do my best to get her to the result she wanted, but I would prioritize the health of her hair above all else, which she agreed to. To ensure everything was clear, I sent her an email before her appointment with all the details and had her sign an agreement. In this document, it was stated explicitly that color correction would require multiple sessions and that the final result may take time to achieve. The appointment itself went well. There were no issues during the process, but when it came time to reveal the results of the first session, my friend seemed a bit disappointed. She brought up the TikTok video again, asking why her hair didn't look like the one in the video. I explained to her that the video she had sent me showed the outcome of multiple sessions stacked together, and that's why it looked so dramatic. I emphasized again that we were just beginning the process and that the health of her hair was my main concern. She paid for the session and left without any further discussion. However, that evening, I received a call from another friend who told me that my friend was upset, crying on the phone, claiming I had ruined her hair. I was a bit shocked, so I waited for her to reach out to me directly. Later that night, I got a text from her asking for a refund and demanding a free follow-up appointment to fix her hair. I calmly reminded her of the email she had signed, which clearly stated that it would take multiple sessions to achieve the desired outcome, and that I had been upfront with her every step of the way. She responded by getting upset and hanging up on me. The next morning, I got a call from my boss telling me that my friend had filed a formal complaint against me and had also tagged both me and the salon in a Facebook post, publicly criticizing me and my work. I was shocked and confused because I had done everything I could to be transparent and communicative. Now, I'm receiving messages from mutual friends pressuring me to give her a refund because she's threatening to sue me for pain and suffering, claiming the situation has caused her anxiety and affected her self-esteem. I'm feeling overwhelmed by the situation and just want to be fair, but I also feel that I did everything I could to manage expectations and communicate clearly. So, am I the asshole for not giving her a refund? Am I the asshole for getting my nephew and niece Christmas presents? I, 27F, recently had an argument with my sister, 32F, which has led to a bit of tension between us. A few weeks ago, she and her baby daddy dropped off my nephew, 2M, and niece, 8MOF, at my mom's house late on a Saturday night so they could go to the laundromat. My mom agreed to watch them, and I helped out by holding my niece while my mom took care of some things around the house. I also helped entertain the kids and ordered pizza for everyone. When my sister and her baby daddy got back, I jokingly said that they had waited for me to clean up my niece's poopy diaper before they returned. My sister joked back, and everything seemed fine. But things took a turn when we all gathered in the living room to relax. My sister, sitting in a rocking chair, started berating me for being clingy and annoying. At first, I didn't care, but when my mom, who doesn't speak English, asked what was going on, I said my sister was just being jealous. My mom, trying to defuse the situation, told my sister that she could lay her head on the other side of her lap and didn't need to be jealous. However, my sister kept going, saying I was too old to act like this and that I was the only one of our siblings who did stupid things like that. She said I needed to grow up. I finally got fed up, especially when she got her baby daddy involved in insulting me. So I called her a fucking bitch and went to my room. The next day, my sister texted me saying, "Sorry if my comments offended you," but it didn't seem like a genuine apology to me. I replied, telling her to reflect on her actions before we could have a real conversation. This isn't the first time she said hurtful things, and I wasn't going to let this half-hearted apology slide. My sister texted back doubling down, telling me that I look stupid for being affectionate to my mom, who's never been that affectionate to her, but has been affectionate to me. She said I needed to stop being childish and that no one wanted me around. She told me I was disrupting their peace and shouldn't be at my mom's house. I called her bitter and jealous, saying that I could be at my mom's house because she's my mom, and I don't care for her opinion. In response, my sister said she didn't want me around her kids anymore and blocked me. Now that Christmas is coming up, my mom asked my sister if it would be okay for me to get my nephew and niece presents. My sister told my mom that she wouldn't let the kids open the gifts if I bought them. My mom suggested I just not get them anything. Growing up, I had a bad experience where my dad's side of the family invited us over for Christmas, but only gave presents to my cousins, leaving me and my siblings out. I don't want to exclude my nephew and niece from that same feeling, especially since they're just kids and have nothing to do with our adult drama. However, I'm also hesitant because I don't want to give my sister any reason to ruin Christmas again, as she's done in the past when things didn't go her way. So I'm torn. Would I be an asshole for getting my nephew and niece presents despite my sister's wishes? Am I the asshole for not letting my brother-in-law's on-off girlfriend call herself auntie? I'm currently 25 weeks pregnant with my first child, and as you can imagine, the family is really excited about the new addition. My brother-in-law, Bael, has been dating his girlfriend for about 3 years, but their relationship has been very on and off. They break up every few months and then get back together. My relationship with her has always been distant. We're civil, but we don't talk much, and there's an awkwardness whenever we're at family events since we don't have much in common. Lately, though, my BIL's girlfriend has started calling herself auntie when talking about my baby and has made several comments about bonding with the child once they're born. This really makes me uncomfortable. My sister, who is incredibly excited to be an aunt, has voiced her frustration over others using the auntie title, especially when they haven't shown a genuine interest in the baby. It's also upsetting to me because my BIL and his girlfriend's relationship is so unpredictable. They break up and get back together all the time, and I don't want my baby getting confused by all these different women coming in and out of the picture. I feel like it's too soon for her to claim that role, especially when we're not close and there's no stability in her relationship with my brother-in-law. I've thought about it a lot and have decided that I don't feel comfortable with her calling herself auntie. Am I being unreasonable for asking her not to? Update. Thank you all for your feedback. After reading the comments, I've realized that it's not just the title of auntie that bothers me, but more the idea that she's trying to establish a role in my child's life when I don't know her well, and there's no commitment in her relationship with my brother-in-law. If they were more stable or if she were around more often, I might feel differently, but at this point, it just feels awkward and out of place. I also wanted to clarify that my husband and I are first-time parents, and we've gone through a lot of struggles with fertility and child loss. This has made us extra protective and cautious about the people we allow into our baby's life. I know that once the baby arrives, we might not care as much about small things like this, but right now, hormones and emotions are running high, and we just want to make sure our baby is surrounded by love and stability. I think I may have misrepresented my sister. She has been an incredible support throughout our pregnancy, and she respects our boundaries. She is my best friend, and I can always count on her. The issue she has with my BIL's girlfriend using the title of auntie is not about her being possessive, but more about the uncertainty in the relationship. My sister is just worried that the title will be diluted if the baby starts calling other people auntie when they come and go. She wouldn't mind if the relationship were more stable. Culturally, my husband and I come from small, tight-knit families where titles like aunt, uncle, grandma, and grandpa are only used for blood relatives or through marriage. We just feel uncomfortable with the idea of the baby calling someone who's not family by those titles, especially someone who may not be in the picture long term. I know other people might have different views, and that's okay, but this is what works for us. In the end, I don't feel comfortable with someone who's practically a stranger trying to claim a role as close as auntie. If they become a more committed couple, I'm open to reconsidering it. Next time my BIL's girlfriend brings it up, I'll be sure to set clear boundaries and explain how I'm feeling. So, am I the asshole for not letting her call herself auntie? Am I the asshole for refusing to go on the family road trip if my aunt's parents come? To give some context, the last time I went on a trip with them, I was 9 years old. My family, my parents, my sister, and both of my grandmothers, went to my uncle's house for Christmas break, and then we decided to take a road trip. My parents, my grandma, and another uncle were in one car with the luggage, while my uncle, aunt, cousins, sister, aunt's parents, and I were in another. The trip started off fine, and my cousins and I brought CDs to watch movies in the car, which was a fun distraction. Eventually, we stopped for dinner, and after that, I started feeling a little sick. I asked if I could sit in the middle row of the car instead of the back because it was making me feel worse. I'd been sitting in the back from the beginning of the trip. My cousin, however, refused to let me sit there because he wanted a better view of the movie. We bickered about it for a while, but eventually he agreed to move to the back so I could sit in the middle between my sister and cousin. After that, we finished the movie and, as expected, all of us kids fell asleep. I closed my eyes but was still awake, and that's when I heard something that really upset me. I overheard my aunt's parents talking, and they called me the B word. They said I was torturing their grandson, my cousin, and that I had been raised terribly. They also claimed that I couldn't adjust to anything and that I was a problem child. My aunt agreed with them and added that I had made her son cry. My uncle tried to change the subject, but they kept bad-mouthing me. It really hurt, but I didn't say anything. At the next stop, at a gas station, I overheard them talk more about me. They were criticizing my mom, calling her the B word, for bumping into my cousin while she was giving me some cotton. I had asked her for the cotton because I don't handle elevation well, and I was feeling sick. But they insisted she only cared about me and ignored my cousins. Then they went on to call my mom fat and overweight, even though she's not obese, just a little chubby. It really stung, but again, I didn't say anything. I just kept quiet and tried to hold back my tears. Later, we arrived at the Airbnb, which was a barn house my dad had booked. My uncle stepped out to check if this was the right place, and that's when my aunt started complaining. She said the place was for animals and that it wasn't appropriate for people because it was a barn. I wanted to shout at her, "Why don't you book it next time?" But I didn't say anything. I was feeling overwhelmed, so I ended up going to my bed and crying. My dad found me, and after I told him about all the rude things they had said, he had a private conversation with my uncle and aunt about it. Now, 8 years later, we're planning another family trip, and while my aunt is much nicer now, her parents are still the same. They still behave the way they did back then. Because of all of this, I've made the decision not to go on the trip if my aunt's parents are going to be there. The rest of my family is saying I'm being dramatic and that I'm ruining the Christmas vacation by refusing to go. They don't understand why I'm still upset after so many years. So, am I the asshole for refusing to go on the trip if my aunt's parents are coming?
Actualización 3. Han pasado 6 meses desde mi publicación original, así que pensé que era momento de una última actualización. Muchas cosas han cambiado en estos últimos meses. La noticia más importante es que he decidido mudarme a otro lugar en busca de una nueva oportunidad laboral. Es un avance significativo en mi profesión y estoy ansioso por las nuevas oportunidades. El trabajo es en una empresa de logística y el trabajo es similar a lo que hacía en el almacén, pero en una escala mucho mayor. Es un puesto de gestión, que es algo hacia lo que he estado trabajando durante un tiempo. El salario es mucho más alto que lo que ganaba anteriormente e incluye beneficios como seguro de salud y un plan 401 Kelvin. Antes de tomar esta decisión, tuve una conversación larga con mi terapeuta. Hablamos sobre cómo este movimiento influiría en mi proceso de sanación y en mi relación con mi familia. Finalmente, estuvimos de acuerdo en que esto podría ser algo bueno para mí, una oportunidad para estar completamente por mi cuenta y definirme fuera del drama familiar. Informé a mis padres sobre mi traslado la semana pasada. Estaban sorprendidos y decepcionados, pero expresaron su comprensión. Mi madre lloró un poco, diciendo que había esperado que tuviéramos más tiempo para restaurar nuestra relación antes de mi partida. Mi padre estuvo más estoico, pero pude ver que también estaba decepcionado. Ambos estaban preocupados porque estuviera solo en un lugar desconocido, pero les dije que estaría bien. Gemma lo tomó de la manera más emocional. Después de que le informé, apareció sin previo aviso en mi apartamento, rogándome que no me fuera. Admitió que sentía que me estaba perdiendo una vez más. Fue una conversación difícil, pero me mantuve firme. Le dije que esto era algo que necesitaba hacer por mí mismo y que nuestra relación no estaba en una posición en la que su opinión pudiera influir en mi decisión. Nuestra relación está mejorando, pero no es perfecta. Hemos disfrutado varias cenas familiares en los últimos meses. Han sido incómodas y torpes en ocasiones, pero estamos aprendiendo gradualmente a estar cerca el uno del otro nuevamente. La confianza sigue siendo un tema importante. A veces cuestiono sus motivos, preguntándome si realmente creen lo que dicen o si solo están tratando de aliviar su culpa. Mi terapeuta ha sido crucial durante todo este proceso. Me ha ayudado a analizar mis emociones y a establecer límites. Me ha enfatizado que el perdón no implica olvidar o pretender que el trauma nunca ocurrió, se trata de dejar ir mi ira para encontrar paz mental. He tomado eso en serio. Aunque no creo que nunca olvide lo que ocurrió, estoy intentando perdonar a mi familia, no por su bien, sino por el mío. Fue difícil cargar con toda mi ira y amargura, y ahora estoy listo para dejarlo ir. Mientras me preparo para este traslado, he estado pensando en todo lo que ha sucedido. Hace 3 años, pensé que mi vida había terminado, había perdido todo, incluyendo a todos los que me importaban. Pero ahora veo cuánto he aprendido de esa experiencia. Soy más fuerte, más independiente y tengo una mejor comprensión de mi propio valor que nunca antes. No sé qué depara el futuro para mí y mi familia. Tenemos la intención de mantenernos en contacto una vez que me mude, con llamadas semanales y visitas durante las fiestas. Es un comienzo. Tal vez con el tiempo y la distancia, podamos crear algo nuevo. Por ahora, mi atención está en el futuro. Estoy emocionado por mi nuevo trabajo. La nueva ciudad y las oportunidades que me esperan. He comenzado a buscar apartamentos en línea y a investigar la región donde voy a vivir. Es una mezcla de emoción y temor, pero en su mayoría estoy ansioso por este nuevo capítulo en mi vida. Pase lo que pase con mi familia, estoy seguro de que estaré bien. Me he demostrado a mí mismo que puedo lidiar con lo que la vida me depare, y he aprendido el valor de rodearme de personas que creen en mí y me apoyan, ya sea que estén relacionadas conmigo o no. Gracias por ver este vídeo. Si aún no se han suscrito, por favor háganlo y activen la campana de notificaciones para mantenerse al tanto de más historias reales y sorprendentes que ocurren a su alrededor.
Am I the asshole for finding it hilarious that my ex-husband cheated on his mistress? So, here's the deal. I, 30F, divorced my ex-husband, 31M, several years ago after enduring 7 years of emotional and financial abuse, plus him having multiple affairs. He had no interest in custody of our kids, an 8-year-old son and 5-year-old daughter, so I have sole custody. The final straw that led to the divorce was that he got one of his mistresses pregnant. At the time, this mistress was actually someone I worked with. She was a nurse at the hospital where I was employed. Once everything fell apart, I switched hospitals within the same healthcare system, left the toxic relationship behind, worked on myself in therapy, found peace and healing, got remarried, and started a much happier chapter of my life. I haven't really spoken to my ex in years. However, since I used to work with the mistress, I still have friends at that hospital. Occasionally, I'll get a text with some gossip or drama about my ex and his mistress. I usually find it funny and laugh it off, then move on with my day. For some context, both the mistress and I are ER nurses and my ex is a paramedic, so we all work together in this toxic, high-stress environment. Anyway, the other day, one of my old colleagues texted me to tell me that my ex was cheating on his mistress with another nurse in the ER. And suddenly, all this old anger and frustration I didn't even know was still inside me came flooding back. It was like, I knew he wouldn't change. I felt this strange mixture of satisfaction and anger, thinking about how she would soon find out what he was really like and experience the same pain I had all those years ago. I guess part of me was like, what goes around comes around, and a little bit of karma's a bitch. I asked my friend if the mistress knew yet, and she said as far as anyone knew, she had no idea. Apparently, the nurse he was cheating with had told someone else in the ER, and that person had spread the word to the entire department. I then called my best friend, who is also a paramedic, to laugh about the situation. After listening to me rant for a bit, she suggested she could tell the mistress about what was happening. My best friend was with me through everything during the divorce, and she knows how badly I was hurt by both my ex and his mistress. She was furious on my behalf, and I guess we both wanted some kind of poetic justice. So, she reached out to the mistress using a fake number, gave her all the details of the affair, and provided some evidence. The mistress and my friend exchanged some texts, so I know she got the message. Now I'm sitting here feeling a mix of satisfaction and guilt. On one hand, I know I shouldn't have been as invested in the situation, but on the other hand, I can't help but feel a little vindicated knowing that my ex is getting a taste of his own medicine. I realize that he's mostly to blame for the affair, but the mistress knew about me. She knew who I was and still chose to get involved with him. So I feel like she deserved to know the truth. So, the question is, am I the asshole for ensuring that the mistress found out about his affair with the other nurse? Or should I have just let her find out on her own, eventually? I blamed my twin sister for how my parents treated me growing up, and ruined our relationship. And it sucks this is going to be a long one, and I apologize in advance. I've been carrying a lot of guilt and frustration for a long time, and I just need to get this off my chest. My twin sister, and I have been through a lot growing up, especially since our parents divorced when we were only 2 years old. I don't think I realized it at the time, but our family dynamic had a huge impact on both of us. I'll start with one incident that stuck with me. One year, during the long weekend before school started, the kids next door and I were all playing on the swing set in my dad's backyard. I went inside to use the bathroom, and when I walked back out, my dad was standing on the back deck looking at me with anger in his eyes. He said, "How could you do that to your sister?" I had no clue what he was talking about, and before I could ask, he rushed inside. I went outside and found a group of adults from the neighborhood gathered around my sister, who was crying. I looked around and realized my dad was inside on the phone. Turned out that M had fallen off the swing and broken her arm. My dad had assumed I pushed her and told my mom that over the phone. Minutes later, my mom and an ambulance arrived. She looked at me and immediately asked how I could have hurt my sister. I was in shock. I told her the truth. I had been in the bathroom and hadn't touched her. But she didn't believe me. M went to the hospital and got a cast, but the damage was done. My parents kept repeating, "How could you do that to your sister?" I tried to defend myself and asked M to tell them the truth, but she wouldn't or couldn't remember what happened. I'm not sure why, but it left me feeling completely isolated and blamed. Fast forward to our first Meet the Teacher event at a new school. My mom introduced us to the teacher by saying, "This is M, my good child, and this is A, my bad child." I was mortified. This wasn't a one-time thing. She started introducing us like this to every teacher, coach, neighbor, or even strangers she met. Sometimes, she switched it up to calling me the angel and M the devil child, just to keep it fresh. This constant labeling made me feel like I was always the problem, always the one who was in trouble. Over time, I started internalizing that narrative. I was being treated as the bad child, and I began acting like it. I took my frustration out on M. I bullied her, pushed her, and was mean to her because, in my mind, if she just told my parents the truth, that I didn't push her, maybe they would stop treating me like this. I thought maybe I could change their perception of me. But the more I pushed my sister away, the worse things got. I became the bad child they always said I was. Eventually, I had a bitter realization. This bad child label wasn't my fault. It was my parents' doing. They were the ones who put me in that box, not M. But by then, the damage to my relationship with my sister had already been done. I treated her horribly for years, and I didn't blame her for pulling away from me. As I got older, I decided to try to be the perfect child. I stopped treating him badly, worked hard in school, got a job, and tried to follow all the rules. But even then, things never went back to the way they were. The damage was already too deep. Now, as adults, I really wish we could have the kind of close, supportive relationship that typical twins share. M is having a baby soon, and seeing her go through this big milestone makes me wish we could celebrate it together. As sisters, I want to be there for her, but I feel like I ruined that chance by mistreating her for so many years. I ruined our relationship, and it's hard to accept. I just wanted to share this because I feel like I've been carrying this weight alone for so long. I know I can't undo the past, but I really regret the way I treated her, and it hurts every day. Thanks for listening. The elderly lady shuffled the few remaining steps to the park bench and sat down, happy to catch her breath and rest for a moment. The autumn sunshine was warm, but the nip in the air made her glad of her warm coat. She placed her handbag neatly on her knee. "Good morning," said the silver-haired gentleman at the other end of the bench. "Beautiful day." Elsie smiled. "Yes, it is. Cold, but lovely." The man folded his newspaper and returned the smile. "I'm George." "Hello, George. I'm Elsie." She rearranged her scarf, her gnarled fingers struggling in the cold. They sat for a few moments quietly, looking over the city. "I've always loved this view." "Pardon." "The view," George repeated. "I've been coming here since I was a boy. I used to watch the trains." Elsie looked to where George was pointing, down the hill towards the city. "I liked the steam trains. Do you see?" he added, Yes, I can see. No more steam trains now, though, I'm afraid. It was different, then. George nodded. It was. I travel the country. My folks had no idea where I was half the time. It wasn't like it is today. He paused. Do you have children? Yes, two. And grandchildren now. Then you're blessed. What are their names? George turned to look at Elsie, noticing her careworn face, the long white plate that rested over her shoulder. Timothy is the eldest. He has two little ones of his own now, Elsie said proudly. Well, not so little now. They've grown and gone too. I don't get to see them as much as I'd like. I've always liked the name Timothy. Elsie smiled. And then there's Ellen. She got married finally last year. She's nearly 60. She finally took the plunge. Well, that's lovely. It is. It was. She looked beautiful. George sat back. I always wanted children. Another few moments passed by, quietly. Elsie looked over. You can read your newspaper, George. I don't mind. No, it's okay. I don't often get chance to chat, especially with a beautiful woman, he said with a wink. Elsie chuckled. Charmer. I bet you broke some hearts. I don't know about that. Did you grow up around here then? Yes, replied George. Not far. And I went to school here too. Calder something. He shook his head. I forget. Age does. That to us, doesn't it? Elsie asked softly. George shrugged. I guess it does. She sighed. It takes away the most precious things. Our bodies, our minds, our memories. They fell into quiet again, both looking at the city sprawled out before them, lost in their own thoughts. May I ask you something, George? He turned to look at her again. Of course. Have you ever married? George shook his head. No, I never married. There was a girl I knew. Once. I forget her name. Have you? Yes. I was lucky enough to marry my best friend. The love of my life. Well, that's wonderful. Yes, it was wonderful. I've lost him now. And it's lonely. Terribly, terribly lonely. Elsie looked down at her lap. George reached over and took her hand, tenderly. I'm very sorry for your loss. How long ago? Around 5 years ago. Nothing has been the same since. Tears filled her once bright blue eyes. They were cloudy now. Age and sorrow had faded their beauty. George frowned. That's such a shame. Do you have anyone close? Elsie shook her head. They have their own lives. Timothy is in Chester, Ellen in Manchester. And I feel like all I do is cross names out of my address book. She paused. All of my friends. They're all gone. George reached into his pocket for his handkerchief and offered it to her. There now. It's okay. Elsie managed a small smile. Thank you. She wiped her eyes. It's silly. You must think I'm an old fool, sitting on a bench crying. Not at all. Well, I feel like an old fool. I should be glad of what I have. I'm still here. My children are happy and healthy. You were right. I have been blessed. George looked puzzled. What? A minute ago you said I was blessed. For having my children. Oh, that's right. He shook his head. I'm more forgetful the older I get. Elsie tried to pass the handkerchief back, but George refused. Keep it, I have plenty. Okay, I will. Thank you. She opened her handbag and tucked the handkerchief inside. She snapped it shut again. It's a funny old life, George, don't you think? He tilted his head, not understanding. In what way? I just can't believe I'm here, at the end of my life. And what do I really have to show for it? George didn't reply. I don't feel any different than I did 10 years ago, 20 years ago even. And now when I look in the mirror, an old woman looks back. She sighed. It all feels so pointless. George cleared his throat. I don't know how to help you with that one. I'm afraid, he said, a little uncomfortably. I know, George. I don't expect answers. I just wanted to say it out loud. Quiet fell again. I used to take the trains, you know, all around the country. Yes, you said. George laughed. I did. Elsie smiled, indulgently. Yes, and your parents didn't know. Not a clue. Not like today. No, George. It isn't like today at all. George turned to look at her. Do you know, you seem really familiar. Have we met before? Elsie sighed. Yes, we have met. George frowned. And it's time we went home. This cold is getting right to my bones. George continued to frown. Come on. I've got a casserole in the oven. And then it's time for the racing. You like the racing? She stood stiffly, then held her hand out. She smiled encouragingly. Come on, George. Home time. George stood still frowning. Home. Yes, sweetheart. Home. And we can ring Tim later and see him on the screen. Remember. George nodded slightly and stood. Don't forget your paper. The elderly couple walked away from the park bench where they had sat every Sunday morning for the past 50 years, hand in hand, back to the house where they had raised their children. Empty now, thought Elsie as she led her husband back through the park. Entirely empty. My sister steals the spotlight at my wedding to announce her pregnancy, and now she blames me for the fallout. I'm 28 years old and recently got married to my boyfriend of 5 years, Jason, who's also 28. My younger sister, Allison, who's 26, was also at the wedding, and, as usual, she was trying to steal the show. But thankfully, I was 2 steps ahead of her. About a week ago, the baker handling our wedding cake told me that Allison had contacted her. She claimed she wanted another cake for the wedding, a cake to announce her pregnancy. Allison told the baker that I had requested it and gave her the instructions to contact Allison. But the baker didn't buy it. She even offered to pay double what I was paying just to keep it a secret from me. Fortunately, the baker had good ethics and told me about it as soon as she could. As soon as I found out, I realized that Allison was planning to pull a stunt at my wedding to get attention. I could have disinvited her, but instead, I decided to stay ahead of her and not let her ruin my special day. It really upset me that she couldn't tolerate my happiness and was always trying to make everything about herself. I would never do something so foolish for attention. The day of the wedding, everything went smoothly during the ceremony. Then, when it was time to cut the cake with Jason, Allison interrupted, saying she had an announcement. She brought her own cake from the baker and everyone was surprised, except Jason and me, because I had already told him this would happen and we had planned for it. Her cake was a pregnancy announcement with a message that said, "Congratulations on the new baby." People started congratulating her and her husband, and my parents were the worst. They started crying and completely forgot about me. Fortunately, some relatives stuck by my side instead of crowding around her, which, in my opinion, was extremely inappropriate since it was my wedding. After everyone congratulated Allison, she wore a self-satisfied look on her face and suggested we continue with the wedding. At that moment, I decided to bring out my special guest, someone who could really ruin Allison's moment. Honestly, I didn't even care that this was happening at my wedding. It made things more memorable, especially for Allison. After she suggested continuing, I smiled and told her I was really happy for her, which surprised her. Then I pretended to be confused and told her to wait, because there was someone special who needed to be there to complete the celebration. That was the signal for my special guest to enter the room as planned. Everyone was waiting to find out who this person was. It turned out to be Allison's ex-boyfriend, Jared, the one she had been with before her husband, Eric, 28. Allison and Jared had lived together for a while, but they had problems in their relationship because Jared wanted to get married, but Allison wasn't ready. I did the math and concluded there had been some overlap. Allison had been seeing Jared and Eric at the same time for at least 6 months. Even Jared knew, but he didn't say anything. I didn't bring it up either because I didn't think it was worth mentioning. Until now, Allison had been cheating on Eric at the start of their relationship, and nobody knew about it. But once I found out what Allison was doing and how much drama she was creating, I decided it was time to expose the truth. After the baker contacted me, I let Allison go ahead with her plan, and I secretly contacted Jared. I thought it was about time Eric knew what was going on. Jared was shocked when I told him Allison was pregnant and planning to announce it at my wedding. Apparently, she had stayed in touch with him all these years, not expressing love or anything, but she would check in every couple of weeks, asking how he was doing. If you've broken up with someone and gotten married to another person, There's no reason to stay in contact with your ex, especially when you hadn't fully ended things with them until you were sure about your current partner. Jared felt completely betrayed by Allison. He realized she had been leading him on, pretending to care for him while being married to someone else. So when I told her my plan, it took some convincing, but in the end, she agreed to come. When she entered the room on my wedding day, Allison's smile completely vanished. Everyone who knew Jared stopped smiling too, and the atmosphere turned tense and awkward. Jared didn't waste time and went straight to Allison. He congratulated her on the pregnancy and then told Eric that it was very sweet of him to let her stay in touch with Jared, even though they had broken up a long time ago and she had been cheating on both of them. Obviously, Eric had no idea about any of this, so he was shocked and didn't even know what to say. Once that was done, Jared thanked me and Jason for inviting him, then left. After that, there were a few moments of silence, followed by complete chaos. Eric started yelling at Allison for what he'd just discovered, and then they both stormed off. My parents began yelling at me for doing something so dishonest and insane just to get back at my sister for something so trivial and small. But I didn't care, so I told them that if they didn't like what I'd done, they could leave too. They did, along with a few other guests who didn't seem to approve of my actions. The people who stayed were some relatives and most of my friends. Thankfully, not too many people left, and we were able to continue the wedding as planned. My parents were no longer there, and honestly, at that point, I was fine with it. After all that, no one mentioned Allison again. Before they left, people just congratulated me on the wedding and then left. When we got home after that, Jason and I were pretty sure we had done the right thing, and honestly, we still feel that way. However, the day after our wedding, my parents gave me an ultimatum when they came to visit. They showed up in the morning, and I was pretty surprised to see them because the last time we spoke, I told them they were free to leave my wedding, and they did. But then they entered my house and told me that because of me, my sister's marriage was in trouble. Apparently, Eric, like any sensible person, was really angry with Allison for staying in contact with Jared, even though she had been married to him for almost a year. He was also upset because there had been an overlap, which meant she had been cheating on him at the beginning of their relationship, and he hadn't even known. He felt like a fool, and I couldn't blame him for that. Allison had cheated, and all I did was expose her. I don't think I did anything wrong. If anyone had ruined her marriage, it was Allison herself. I didn't understand why my parents were blaming me for it, and I started arguing with them because it seemed so unfair. But they told me they weren't here to argue. They just wanted to tell me that if I didn't apologize to Allison and Eric and tell them that everything Jared said was something I suggested as a joke, they would never speak to me again. It seemed like a really stupid idea to me because even if I said it was all a joke, I didn't think Eric was that dumb. I'm pretty sure he would figure out we were trying to cover up what had happened. And more importantly, I really didn't want to do any of that. This wasn't a joke gone wrong. This was the truth, and I thought it was important for it to come out eventually. I told my parents I wouldn't apologize for anything, and if they didn't like it, they could go for a walk. Then they started yelling at me, calling me selfish and mean because what Allison did was nothing compared to what I had done. They said I had completely crossed the line and lost my mind because it reflected badly not just on Allison, but on the whole family, and it seemed like I didn't even care. Eventually, they left and we blocked each other, including my mom. But I haven't stopped thinking about what they said. Maybe I did go too far, but it was Allison who started it, and her initial intention was to make my wedding day about her. I just gave her exactly what she wanted. So I still don't understand how I'm the villain here. Anyway, am I the bad one for ruining my sister's marriage? Update 1. First of all, I want to thank everyone for all the responses. It means a lot to me and my husband that so many people are on our side. I'll also answer some questions that people had for us. A lot of people wanted to know how I had so many mutual friends with Jared. Basically, Jared and Jason went to the same high school, but since he was a year younger, they weren't close friends. Turns out he was on the football team, and many of Jason's friends were on that team. So that's how I knew Jared. I'm friends with many of Jason's friends who were also friends with Jared, so that's how I found out about their relationship and the overlap and all that. However, Jared and I were never especially close, and this is the only time we really spoke much while we were planning this whole thing. Unfortunately, I don't have an answer as to why Jared hadn't cut Allison out of his life after their breakup, even after he realized she had been cheating on him with Eric. We weren't close enough for those kinds of discussions, and I think it's a very personal matter. I know he's still in love with her and I feel bad for him, but I'm not a psychologist, so I'm not going to get involved unless it's necessary. I had a plan, he agreed to it, and that was all we needed to talk about. Beyond that, I don't know anything about his feelings for Allison or why he did what he did. As for Allison, of course, I don't know what was going through her head when she was trying to stay in contact with Jared even after breaking up with him and being in a committed relationship with Eric. So, unfortunately, I don't have answers to that either. Anyway, it's been a week since my wedding, and now I've completely moved on from all of this. I really don't care if Eric and Allison divorce or decide to stay together. I just don't care. My parents care a lot and I understand that. We've blocked each other now, so we won't talk anymore. I felt a little bad about that, but I should have known this was going to happen eventually because I always knew that my sister is practically the golden child to them. It's sad, but it is what it is. I can't avoid it. During my childhood, I tried hard to earn my parents' approval, but my sister was the youngest, so she was always special to them. I'm not gonna lie, I used to be really jealous of her, but as we grew older, the jealousy turned into resentment, and I just started avoiding her. The only reason she was even invited to my wedding was because my parents insisted, and because she had invited me to hers. As for what I said about her seeking attention, that part is true. She really can't stand it when all the attention is on me, and she always wants to make everything about her. That's part of why I started avoiding her in the first place, and now, obviously, we'll be keeping our distance from each other. I haven't heard from anyone else in the family, apart from the people I know are on my side. Everyone else has blocked me or doesn't want anything to do with me, and I'm fine with that. If taking a stand for myself bothers them that much, then they probably shouldn't be in my life either. I haven't stayed in touch with Jared. I just thanked him via text after everything was done on my wedding day, and he replied saying he was happy to have gotten the closure he needed. So I don't know if she's reached out to him again, but if she does, I'm pretty sure he'll tell me. For now, everything is oddly quiet, but it's good for Jason and me. We're enjoying our newlywed life, and in a few days we'll be heading on our honeymoon. I just hope and pray that any drama my parents or Allison want to cause, they do it before our honeymoon, because once we leave, I'm not entertaining any of this nonsense anymore. In fact, even if they try to reach out to me before then, I know exactly what to do. I'll put them in their place and end this once and for all. They've shown me exactly where I stand with them, so it's time I do the same. Update 2. I was right about Jared. He got in touch with me as soon as Allison sent him a text. It was yesterday, just after I posted the last update here. A few hours after that, Jared messaged me, saying Allison had called him and asked to meet up. Apparently, she wanted to talk in person, so he went to meet her at a cafe. But he got the surprise of his life when he realized that both Allison and Eric were there. It was kind of a setup. As soon as he got there, he was about to leave, but Eric stopped him and started yelling at him. He told Jared to stay away from Allison, as if it was Jared's fault. Jared pointed out that he had no problem staying away from Allison. In fact, that's exactly what he had wanted after their breakup, because he needed time to heal and move on. But it was Allison who kept trying to re-enter his life and kept in contact with him. So if Eric wanted someone to yell at, he should probably yell at Allison instead of blaming Jared. Eric refused to believe any of it, insisting that Allison had told him that Jared was the one who kept reaching out to her, and that she was only responding to be polite. But Jared was ready with evidence. He pulled out his phone and showed Eric the screenshots of his conversations with Allison, which clearly showed that it was Allison who kept contacting him after their breakup. After that, Eric had nothing else to say, so Jared took his chance and left. I'm pretty sure that after this, there's no way the two of them will stay together. When Jared told me all this, he explained that he had gone to meet Allison one last time because he really loved her, but after everything she had done, he would never speak to her again. And I think that's good for him. He needs to move on because Allison just isn't worth it. I also think Eric should leave her because she is definitely confused. I can't imagine doing that to not one, but two guys, one of whom is about to have a baby with you. It's just disgusting. And I'm sure my parents will find a way to justify this too and try to blame me for everything. They haven't reached out yet, but after what just happened, I'm pretty sure they will. And I'm really just waiting for that because I've got a lot to say to them too. Update 3 days after my last update, my family finally came to visit me. As I mentioned before, my parents had blocked me just like Allison, but instead of unblocking me and contacting me through messages or calls, they decided to come bother me in person. I still invited them over so we could talk and put an end to this weird relationship we've had. My parents started by saying that they had treated us both equally throughout our lives, but I had always been envious of my sister for no real reason. I mean, they got it completely wrong. They never treated us equally, but I didn't get angry. I just let them talk because I wanted to see where they were going with this. Then they told me that on my wedding day, my sister just wanted to share in my happiness, which is why she had planned to announce her pregnancy that same day. They said she truly thought I would be happy for her. But it was clear that I had known about her plan from the beginning and didn't agree with it, which is why I set up that little situation with Jared. It was obvious that I wanted to embarrass and humiliate Allison, and my parents couldn't understand why. Of course, they didn't think Allison had done anything wrong. They even told me that if I didn't agree with what Allison was planning to do, I should have talked to her after I found out about her pregnancy announcement plans when she spoke to the baker, confronted her about it, and avoided the situation instead of trying to get back at her for something so trivial. Finally, they told me that because of what I had done, inviting Jared to the wedding and causing a confrontation between the two, Eric was now asking for a divorce. Apparently, Allison had really tried to fight for her marriage, but Eric had made a decision, and it couldn't have come at a worse time since she's pregnant and has no idea what to do now. So they came to me and demanded that not only should I apologize to Allison, but I should also cover all the divorce costs and her medical expenses over the next few months, and even after that if needed. Naturally, the whole idea was so absurd that I laughed. Couldn't believe my parents actually thought I would do it. They seemed shocked that I was laughing, and Allison said she was serious. She said she had the money to cover all of it herself, but because of what I had done, this should be a fitting punishment for me since I was responsible for ruining a happy marriage. I stopped laughing and told her I hadn't ruined anyone's perfect marriage. If she had really had a clean slate, she wouldn't have been in contact with her ex from time to time, even if it was just to see how he was doing. She wouldn't have cared, and she wouldn't have had any connection to him. So if she really wanted to blame someone, she should probably look in the mirror instead of trying to blame me. Then I told her that I wasn't paying for anything at all because if we were really talking about ruined things, she had ruined my wedding, or at least she had tried to. If I hadn't found out earlier, I would have been completely blindsided, and the whole wedding would have been about her pregnancy. She was just angry because I had outdone her and exposed all her lies to her husband. My parents tried to defend her, but I told them that throughout my life, they only thought they treated us equally. Everyone who knew us, however, knew the truth. They had always been biased towards Allison. Even now, they were encouraging her to be selfish and spoiled, even though she had literally ruined her own marriage by being dishonest. My parents were partly responsible for her downfall because if they hadn't spoiled her since she was a child, maybe she would have turned out to be a better person. My parents started arguing with me after that, but I told them I wasn't interested in continuing the discussion. We had already spent enough time on it, and now that they had said what they needed to, and I had said what I wanted, there was nothing more to discuss. They kept trying to talk to me, but I just wasn't interested. So, I told Jason to handle them and went back to my room to rest. Talking with my family was exhausting. Jason stayed out of the argument because he's a bit explosive, and I was pretty sure that my family, with their audacity, would have upset him long before. He would have gotten angry, so it was better for him to stay away for his own good. I didn't want him to get too stressed over something like this. After a while, Jason managed to get them to leave by threatening to call the police. Then it was just the two of us. I'm glad we resolved this before the honeymoon, because now we can enjoy it completely without constantly worrying about what my parents and Allison are doing. Update 4. Jason and I left for our honeymoon 3 days ago, and we're really happy right now. After my parents and Allison left that day, they didn't hesitate to try and make me feel guilty, especially Allison. They had many relatives who were on their side, texting me to say that what I was doing was really disastrous and that I had no right to ruin someone's life like that, especially when they were about to have a baby. Honestly, I don't understand why everyone is blaming me because, as I see it, I'm just the messenger. So, I talked to Jared about it, and we both decided that it was time for everyone to know the truth. He simply posted screenshots of his chats with Allison, and that was all it took. It clearly showed that she was the one who wanted to stay in contact with him. After that post, people started getting even angrier with me, especially Allison and my parents. They claimed I was doing everything I could to ruin their reputation and said this was a clear case of defamation. They even threatened to sue us for defamation. But I don't think it will work because this is the truth, and we're not spreading lies about them. More importantly, even if they file a defamation lawsuit against me, I'll just countersue them for harassment. It's tit for tat. Anyway, I think Allison should be more concerned with the upcoming divorce proceedings and custody battle. If I were her, I wouldn't waste my time trying to fight with others. Fortunately, the family members who have supported me from the beginning have told me they won't stay in touch with my parents or Allison anymore, because it's obvious they are the problem here. They've been terrible to me all along, and I'm glad that people are finally seeing what kind of people they truly are. At first, I felt a little bad because the family split because of what I did, but now I think it was necessary. Anyway, right now Jason and I are focused on enjoying our honeymoon because this time will never come again. And unlike my parents and Allison, we don't plan on letting them ruin our lives. So we're going to make the most of the time we have here. Update 5. Before I start with this update, which has a lot of information, I need to answer a few questions. First, regarding Allison's baby. It might not be Eric's. Well, if I'm honest, I don't know. I don't have proof that the infidelity continued up until now, and Jared hasn't told me that he suspects it's with another man. I don't know, maybe it is. It's not like she's been faithful her whole life, so the chances of it being with another man are high, if you ask me. But I can't exactly go up to Allison and say, "Dear sister, that baby you're carrying is the result of an affair." People have been asking me a lot why I didn't tell Eric earlier. Well, it's not that we had a relationship or even a friendship. If we had been friends, I would have definitely told him. We barely had any relationship with my sister, and with my brother-in-law, I hardly had any contact. I don't have an excuse for that, though. I should have told him, and I just let it slip. As for the update, a lot has happened since the last one. To begin with, we went on our honeymoon, and there was no issue during that time. The drama started only when we returned to our normal lives. First, my mom and her post on Facebook. I still regret helping her set up an account and showing her how to post. In that post, she talked about how hard it was to be a mother, how she gave love to her 2 daughters, and yet some are ungrateful, implying that some have hearts of stone instead of love. It's funny because I might be mistaken, but she treated us differently all our lives. And I'm not talking about small things, but about big differences like how we celebrated birthdays or holidays. If you've made it this far in my story, you can probably imagine what my parties were like compared to Allison's. The worst part is that there was always an excuse to celebrate my birthdays more modestly, like the heater broke that week or the grandmother needed money, but when it came to Allison, there was always money and her parties were full of guests. At that time, I guess they could celebrate without hesitation. I suppose they tried to cover up their favoritism, but I don't know whether to laugh or cry at it. Anyway, my mom made that post with an air of superiority, saying things like, "Few mothers are like me." And despite portraying herself as the best mother ever, some relatives commented on her post and called her out for lying. It took her longer to come up with that story than to achieve anything with it. The funny part came from my sister, who contacted one of her friends to pretend to be some sort of lover of mine. This guy contacted my husband on social media and told him I had been having an affair when we started dating. Wow, it was quite a master plan from my sister. It's clear my husband didn't believe any of it because when he asked for proof, the guy didn't respond. He thought he could do the same to me, but at least he could have tried harder. Maybe this guy is the one sleeping with her, or even the father of the baby, which would explain why he was part of such a circus. This makes me wonder, if she loves getting all the attention, why isn't she enjoying it now? All our relatives and friends are just talking about her divorce and infidelity. The best thing she could do is enjoy it. I don't understand why she'd want to take the focus off her and put it on me. But Well, leaving the sarcasm aside, I think that wraps up the update and answers some of the questions. Am I the asshole for taking my biological nieces on days out and excluding my adopted nephew? I, 42F, have two biological nieces, Flo, 14F, and Ivy, 11F, and an adopted nephew, Ryan, 10M, through my brother Tom, 46M, and his wife Kate, 45F. Ryan was adopted 2 years ago after being in foster care for 3 years. He had a really difficult start in life, and as a result, he has some behavioral and developmental issues that make certain activities difficult for him, like sitting through long performances or events. This means that when I take my daughter Ava, 12F, and the girls out, Ryan isn't always included. I want to emphasize that I've always made an effort